Okay, it is now 6 o'clock, and we will call to meeting the February 12th meeting of the Concord Select Board. Mary, since not everyone is present in person, would you please call the roll?
I will. Mr. Howell?
Present.
And myself, Mary Hartman, present. Ms. Escobedo?
Present.
Mr. Dane?
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. So, do we have a motion on the consent agenda? We have no public comment. I will make this public comment is we have no public comment this morning because we have an extended hearing starting at 7 o'clock on the school budgets and capital plans. And we have two other hearings that we need to conduct before 7 o'clock. So we need to move through the routine agenda.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Mr. Howell?
Aye.
Myself, Mary Hartman, aye. Ms. Escobedo?
Aye.
Mr. Dane?
Aye.
It's unanimous.
Okay.
Me?
All right.
Henry?
Okay, and do we have any committee appointments or nominations?
No, the next is the MIAA.
So the next item on the agenda is our approval of the interlocal insurance agency trust agreement.
Right.
And for this item, I'd like to introduce Assistant Town Manager Jessica Porter, who will make the presentation.
Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you, thank you. Good evening, everyone. So in your packets this evening, you should have a lengthy memo from me as well as a copy of the proposed agreement for approval. For purposes of the public and for benefit of the public and the audience, I'm just going to walk through kind of the key highlights of the memorandum that I provided you so that everybody is aware of how we've got to this point where we need to now ask for your vote of approval. So the town renewed its health insurance plans through Minuteman Neshoba Health Group on July 1st, 2023. That would be for fiscal '24. And at that time, the rates saw an approximate 13.75% increase, which everybody agreed that that was an amount that was not sustainable for the town or for the employees that are subscribing to the insurance, as well as our retiree groups as well. So in September, the board voted to authorize the town to obtain quotes from other insurance providers so we could see if there would be a better option available for employees and retirees. As part of that process, the town convened the Insurance Advisory Committee in the fall of 2023. We researched a variety of different options for insurance benefits for our employees and retirees, including the Maya plans, which we're going to be looking at this evening, as well as the Group Insurance Commission, and also some contracts with direct insurance vendors. So throughout the fall and into early this calendar year, the Insurance Advisory Committee, which is comprised of union representatives from each group, as well as a group of non-voting, non-union members, convened 6 times to review all of the different options. And simultaneously, during the course of the Insurance Advisory Committee's work, we learned that the Minuteman Neshoba Health Group was going to be dissolving as of June 30th of this year. So as a result of those meetings, the Insurance Advisory Group voted unanimously with two abstentions, but otherwise the vote was unanimous, to move to the Maya health insurance plans as of July 1st, 2024. You do have a copy as well in your packets of the signed memorandum showing all of the parties signing off. So this plan will offer insurance to our employees and retirees exclusively through Blue Cross Blue Shield. Currently, our plans now are Blue Cross Blue Shield, as well as some plans with Harvard Pilgrim and Tufts. So for the individuals that are on the Blue Cross Blue Shield plans currently, the transition should be near seamless for those folks. We will have to do a little more work with the folks on Harvard Pilgrim and Tufts plans to help them determine a plan that's best for them and their families' needs. So this trust agreement is part of the move to start those wheels in motion with formalizing everything with Maya. So we do ask for your vote and signature tonight. There is one small amendment in the agreement in that section 3.03 has been removed from the agreement. That pertains to an entry fee. There actually is no entry fee for this.
Good.
So we worked with the folks at Maya to have that clause removed. That is the only change from the agreement that you have in your packets to what will be signed and submitted. So I'm open to any questions the board may have.
It must have been quite a project because you had to get all of the unions to sign on to this?
We're very fortunate that we have a collaborative group, at least based on the couple of meetings I attended. Many of the meetings took place mostly with Carrie prior to my arrival, but it's a really collaborative group from what I've witnessed so far, and it was a team effort, and everybody agreed that finding the best plans for the town and the employees is of utmost importance.
And you understand, you need our signatures, but we can't give you, we don't have everybody here tonight to sign.
Yes, that's fine, as long as we have the vote and we have a majority here, then that will
Okay.
suffice, and then we'll circle up and get any missing signatures
Good.
in the coming days.
Good, thank you. Are there any questions
Quick
from the board?
question.
Linda?
Yeah, thank you very much. I know we're not privy to the cost structure involved in all of this at this point, but clearly you must have had some indication of what this transition is going to look like. And so I'm interested in, if you can, what you can share with just general impressions of what that might look like, and also if this is going to mean an increase in the share that the individuals, employees will be picking up.
Right, so at this point, our splits will remain the same in terms of the percentage contribution paid by the town and then by the employees. Rates will go up slightly, I believe, for the individuals that are involved in the Harvard Pilgrim and Tufts plans, because they're going to be moving towards a different plan under the Blue Cross umbrella, but otherwise, the increases are pretty comparable to what is out there in the market. And I don't know if Carrie wanted to elaborate any further on that from any budgetary perspectives, but.
I will just say from an overall cost perspective, we're expecting this to be neutral for the town. And you may have noticed that when we walk through the budget that we're not projecting an increase in overall health insurance cost. What we will be dealing with at the beginning of fiscal ‑25 is any remaining costs associated with the plan that we are exiting, the Minuteman-Neshoba Health Group. There will be claims that are incurred but not paid as of June 30, and we will need to hold a certain amount in reserve in order to pay those. But overall, it's beneficial for everybody to be transitioning to Maya. I would also mention that we have other insurances through Maya. We've been a long-term member with our property liability, other casualty insurance. So we have a lot of experience with them.
Thank you.
Quick question. Will the coverage be the same? Maybe not for the people, well, is the coverage at least very close?
Yes, the Blue Cross plans mirror our plans now. The
Okay.
only thing that might be slightly different might be physician networks. So
Okay.
we're going to be encouraging everybody as part of our education rollout to just verify with all of their preferred providers that they do accept the Maya Blue Cross plan. It's fairly certain they will, but we will be
Yes.
definitely encouraging people to always check.
Yeah.
The biggest network changes, again, are going to be those folks that are with a Harvard or Tufts plan having to go to a Blue Cross plan. There's the most likelihood of there being possible network changes there, but hopefully with Blue Cross, it's pretty
They have-
widely accepted.
They have a
because
wide
of
network.
Providers.
Yeah,
yes.
okay, good, thank you.
Are we ready for a motion?
I think we are. Move to approve the MIIA trust agreement as included in the select board meeting packet.
And amended with that clause.
Oh, yeah, as and amended. Thank you.
Okay.
A second? Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Howell?
Aye.
Myself, Mary Hartman, aye. Ms. Escobedo?
Aye.
Mr. Dane?
Aye.
It's unanimous.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you
Thanks,
for a
Jess.
great job. Okay, we are now.
Public hearing.
We have a public hearing
Yep.
at
6:15.
6:15, and it is not 6:15 yet, so do we have something else we can,
Town managers report.
yeah, okay, good. Town manager's report.
Okay. Thank you and good evening. I will work with the 6 minutes I have. The assessors.
You can run over.
Well, I don't want to get into your public hearing time. The assessors are reporting that they've received 119 abatement applications through Friday. Or no, through Tuesday, through the 1st. Let's see. It's a little bit higher than we typically would see in a year, but we certainly understand that there's a lot going on this year. I did want to mention that we are closing non-essential municipal offices tomorrow due to the weather. Most, if not all, non-essential employees have the ability to work remote, so we're much better positioned for a closing like this than we have been in years past. Our departments are ready to tackle the storm. We expect most of the most severe weather in the morning. We will be opening our snow desk as of 5 a.m., and that is the number that residents should call in the event that they have any non-emergency service requests, and that number is 978-318-3220. That is on the website. So I mentioned that. Our Public Works team, Alan Cathcart, Steve Duker, and town engineer, and Saul Ibarra, our water and sewer engineer, met with the Concord Business Partnership last week. They presented on all things water and wastewater, but they did focus on the warrant articles, specifically the funding for the water treatment plant and the stormwater utility. Let's see. I wanted to mention that the town clerk's office has received over 3,000, or has mailed over 3,000 ballots for the presidential primary as of last Friday. They asked to remind the public that the deadline to apply for mail-in ballots is Tuesday, February 27th at 5 p.m. I wanted to announce that effective February 9th, last Friday, Detective Keith Harrington was promoted to the position of sergeant. Keith has been with the Concord Police Department for quite a while, so that was an honor to be able to promote him to that position. Let's see, I think I wanted to give Megan a couple of minutes just to talk about MCI Concord before we...
Sure, thank you. Brief update. I want to summarize a few meetings that took place last week. We had, staff had a meeting with Mass Development with the Vice President of Community Investment, and we spoke with her, Mariana McCormick, about this potential opportunity. And she encouraged the town to submit a letter of intent for an upcoming one-stop grant application to request technical assistance, including real estate assistance, environmental support, and market research. So staff's developing a letter of intent, and those letters are being accepted through the end of April. Staff also had a meeting with Representative Cataldo and discussed opportunity at the site. Next week, or this week, we have a meeting scheduled with the director of the Division of Resource Management at the Department of Correction. And the purpose of that meeting is to understand service and operations of the wastewater treatment facility. Later this month, staff's meeting with the commissioner of the Division of Capital Asset Management and Maintenance, also known as DCAM. And we'll be having a high-level discussion about the visioning for DCAM's role and reuse of the property. And we're also identifying other partners and folks to meet with. We're going to be planning a meeting with our regional planning council, other legislators, area communities, and other bodies that provide types of technical assistance in these types of situations. So we're trying to identify stakeholders and support or potential support right now, and meet with them to just kind of hear what others think. That's it for now.
Good, thank you. Your question?
No, I have a comment. I know last week when we met, or 2 weeks ago when we met, Megan, you emphasized that we should speak with one voice when we're talking with the state officials, and I think that word got out to some of the town committees, but there are other organizations within town that we might want to reach out to that aren't necessarily part of that network, that might be contacting the state and kind of diluting or confusing the conversation, so...
something we can bring up at the chair's breakfast.
Well, I'm saying they're not necessarily at the
Chairs.
chair's breakfast, so, anyway, we can talk with you later about,
Sure. Thank you.
okay.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. Still, no, I think we're.
Yeah, we're ready.
At 6:15, and
Yeah.
so we could convene the, do we have a
Yes.
motion to open the hearing?
Move to open the public hearing for a grant of location request for Comcast for a poll petition at 100 Domino Drive. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Howell?
Aye.
And myself, aye. Ms. Escobedo?
Aye.
Mr. Dane?
Aye.
Okay. Who's speaking? Great.
Good evening, Catherine Maloney, just testing to make sure you're hearing me.
We can hear you.
Excellent. Good evening, everyone. I am here to request your permission for two petitions for grant of location, the first being 100 Domino Drive.
Let's just
And
talk about that. Let's talk about that one first, because I really technically haven't opened the hearing for Domino, for the other one. The one
Great.
on
So
Sudbury
just-
Road. Okay?
Certainly. 100
Thank you.
Domino Drive. This is to provide service to 100 Domino Drive. We've provided a draft order. It specifically reads that Comcast of Massachusetts requests permission to install cable to be owned and used by the petitioner along and across the following public way or ways: Domino Drive via Commonwealth Avenue, Lawsbrook Road, and Conant Street. And specifically, the construction under this order shall be in accordance with the following conditions: overlash an additional cable to the existing Comcast network from utility pole number 23 on Commonwealth Avenue to the intersection of Lawsbrook Road, then continue on Lawsbrook Road to the intersection of Conant Street, and from there continue to utility pole number 7, Conant Street. And then the ultimate goal is to provide service to the occupants of 100 Domino Drive. All of this work is to be done in accordance with the town's order of conditions, and it has been reviewed for comment and input from engineering and municipal light.
Do we have any comments or questions?
I have a question. So this is a cable, it's not another pole. It's just going to be cable with existing poles. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, could I just mention, I know the applicant referred to the comments in the packet by engineering and CMLP. I just wanted to mention and introduce two representatives from CMLP one who I know who's been here many times, another who you might not have had the opportunity to meet, but in the audience this evening, Joe Repoff, our Assistant Light Plant Director, and Jeff Cosgrove, who is our lead electrical engineer. And I know Jeff's been here many, many times, but I'm not sure that Joe has. So also comments are presented or were prepared by the engineering department, Justin Richardson, who I know, I don't believe he's on the call this evening, but I know you are very familiar with Justin.
So do any of them have any comments on this application? Everything is in order?
I just had one question, if I may.
Like, Mark?
Is the transition at the corner of Domino and Conant into conduit, and is that conduit already existing, or is there going to need to be excavation on Domino Drive to get to 100?
That conduit already exists.
Okay. And it's Comcast owned?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening, Jeff Cosgrove, as Terry, the town manager, thank you, introduce us, chair, members of the select board.
So this is your moment in the limelight.
I know, I like it. We did, just to kind of reiterate, the great explanation. we did meet with our Comcast engineer, Jody, in the field. We did review this, extensively, and it did confirm there is existing conduit that crosses underneath Conant Street at this time. So no digging would be required, just an overlash of that cable. On CMLP's end, along with CPW, we didn't have any issues and recommended, certain conditions should the board approve this petition.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So this being a public hearing, are there any comments or questions from those who are present or either participating virtually? All right, hearing none, I would entertain a motion to close the hearing.
Yeah, move to close the public hearing. Mr. Howell?
Aye.
And myself, Mary Hartman, aye. Ms. Escobedo?
Aye.
Mr. Dane?
I will second and vote aye.
Good. Oh, second, yes. Move to approve the grant of location request for a poll petition for Comcast located at 100 Domino Drive, subject to the conditions provided by Concord Public Works and Concord Municipal Light Plant.
Second.
Roll call vote. Mr. Howell?
Aye.
And myself, aye. Ms. Escobedo?
Aye.
Mr. Dane?
Aye.
It's unanimous.
Thank you.
Move to open the public hearing for a grant of location request for Comcast for a poll petition at 1861 Sudbury Road. Do I have a second?
Second?
Mr. Howell?
Aye.
And myself, aye. Ms. Escobedo?
Aye.
Mr. Dane?
Aye. All right. Now, you can proceed with the presentation on that second application.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This would be a petition for installation of cable along Sudbury Road. Also included is detail in the draft order, which, let me read the description of the work involved. This is strictly along Sudbury Road, and the construction under this order shall be in accordance with the following conditions. Lash an additional cable to the existing Comcast network from utility pole number 125, Sudbury Road, to utility pole number 153-1, also Sudbury Road. And this request is made in order to provide access to Comcast service to the occupants of 1861 Sudbury Road.
Any comments or questions from the board?
Want to comment from?
Sure. Again, we did meet with Jody Goddard on the same day, and did a walkthrough all the way down, including essentially just north of our Wheeler Road, all the way down to the applicant, which is Nashada Country Club. We didn't perceive any issues or have any comments beyond the recommendations, standard recommendations that we made.
Good.
Thank you. Any comments or questions on this?
No. Move to close.
Any comments from the audience or either online or present with us tonight? All right, we ready for a motion to close?
Move to close the public hearing. Do I have a second?
Second?
Mr. Howell?
Aye.
Myself, aye. Ms. Escobedo?
Aye.
Mr. Dane?
Aye.
Unanimous. Move to approve the grant of location request for a poll petition for Comcast located at 1861 Sudbury Road, subject to the conditions provided by Concord Public Works and Concord Municipal Light Plant. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Howell?
Aye.
And myself, aye. Ms. Escobedo?
Aye.
Mr. Dane?
Aye.
Good. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that takes care of the routine business we've done. I guess that would bring us to the acceptance of the public art proposals.
Yes.
This is the item 4 on the agenda.
Yes.
Maybe you're going to make the presentation on that?
Sure, there's several representatives from the West Concord Junction Cultural District here as well that can maybe speak to specifics. The West Concord West Concord Junction Cultural District is a designation through the Mass Cultural Council for a committee to work specifically in that neighborhood to leverage the community's arts and culture assets for economic development. And the committee is proposing 2 public art installations. One is for painting of existing traffic signal switch boxes. Those are those metal boxes near intersections, to paint those with designs presented by artists in the community. And they've already met with Public Works to identify the specific boxes and the conditions under which they can be painted. The second project is for a poetry phone. So this would sort of look akin to like an English style phone box. There would be a solar-powered payphone. It's actually a repurposed old payphone that you would press a button and get to listen to a pre-recorded poem. And there would be curation of the individual poems that would change periodically. That is proposed to be installed alongside the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, just on the edge of the cultural district, sort of on Baharrel Street. And that property was also identified by Public Works as an appropriate site for that installation.
And you're here in front of us because it's in the public way.
Yes, so this is our guinea pig projects for a new way of having a process to approve public art. Up to now, it was sort of a little staccato, so our goal is to have sort of a two-part process, one for the select board to approve projects in spirit, enough for the artists to invest additional time to do a call for artists, to seek the additional approvals, for example, historic districts or public works, it's basically to make sure that the town is in general agreement with this. Then the sponsoring group or the artist will then go and secure all the specifics related to the project, and they'll appear before the select board a second time with the specific details. So for example, for the Switchbox project, they'll have the specific designs that they're wanting to include. For the poetry phone, they'll have the completed contract for the installation of that phone on site, and potentially we'll have some of the first round of poems available.
Linda?
Thank you. Mimi, if I recall correctly, I think you presented this to the Economic Vitality Committee, did you? Yeah, I think I've heard that. So, and as I recall, you had support from the Economic Vitality Committee for going forward. I think this is a very creative way to involve more than one typical area of arts that we are able to involve in some of the community projects, so I think this is great. You referenced in the material that we received that other cities and towns across the country have done this, and I know that there's a clause in there, should there be some issues with keeping them in pristine condition, I'll leave it that way. I guess, do you have some sense of the experience that the other towns and cities have had with any potential problems?
So I've worked in several other communities facilitating public art projects. Very often, public art is used as a means to avoid problems, so it's an
Right.
anti-graffiti device. In Concord, some of the public art that the West Concord Junction Cultural District has already done in terms of murals have not been a problem in terms of maintenance. In the agreements, there will be stipulations both to define how the maintenance during the term of which it's installed will be continued, and terms under which the artwork could be removed. So maybe it might be in disrepair. So for example, with the poetry phone, it might say, if the phone stops working for a certain period of time and the group isn't able to fix it, that how long they have before it has to be taken off site, for example.
Yeah, I did notice that in the material. I think well, I'll be optimistic, and I think in general the spirit of the project is great. I think the difference here is that the boxes that are being utilized for this art project are at ground level as opposed to the murals that basically have been off ground. So, let's hope they're respected as we go forward. Thank you.
Mary?
I think this is a great idea. We see these. I see these in Belmont. I see them in Pittsfield. I see them in other, and they always make me smile or think or something. So I think this is a great idea. I do have some questions. What is the funding for this? Where's the funding coming from for this?
So the West Concord Junction Cultural District receives $15,000 every year from the Mass Cultural Council.
Okay.
Specifically to do these types of projects within the district.
Okay, so this will be part of that awarding that 15,000, great, okay. And what was my other, and I think Linda already talked about the maintenance, so that's, I think, something that we want to be very careful about. But I really thank you for doing this. I mean, it'll be fun. We need fun.
I want to congratulate you for keeping it as simple as possible, you know.
I know you like one-pagers. I couldn't fit it.
Keep it as simple as possible, you know, and not trying to anticipate any problems or issues, which we can always deal with when they come up. So.
Who chooses the poetry?
We are working with established writing programs throughout the community, so with the schools, with the library, and game, oh, sorry.
He is our,
nice
this is
job.
Anthony, who is our.
Who depends upon Shannon,
CFO and sound band.
who asks Shannon how to turn on the mic.
Is it on? Can you hear this? Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
So, we are going to work with established writing programs at the schools, K through 12, and with the libraries that have kids and adult writing programs, trying to tap into the existing poetry groups. And as the part of the project is to lift up those groups and to make those groups visible. And we're asking the folks who run those programs to choose, say, 5 poems a season, and that we will then pick from those poems and change the poems throughout the year.
Great, great. Cool.
Any other comments or encouragement?
Your question?
Yeah,
No.
you need a microphone.
You need a mic.
Because if it's not recorded, it doesn't exist.
So I just, Mary, you mentioned,
Please identify
oh,
yourself.
sorry, Joe Lauren, Southfield Road here in Concord. So I thought, Linda, the question you asked about upkeeping and making sure they're not worn and vandalized, I think is a great one. Mary, you mentioned Pittsfield. It happens to be my hometown.
Oh, okay.
What I've seen there is that these things over time, even if they're not actively abused, they get worn and they look old and they need to be refreshed. Maybe the theme just goes out of style or whatever. So I'm wondering if there's a plan to periodically renew them so that things are kept fresh, even from the paint as well as theme and things like that.
Sure. So the idea is that,
Carolyn, identify yourself, please.
I'm sorry?
Identify yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm
That's okay.
Carolyn Bodum. I'm the chair of the West Concord Junction Cultural District Committee. So the plan is that they would have a lifespan of about 3 years. And then at that time, we would look, see, do we want to do the program again and have them have another design painted? If something happened and they really were not in good shape, then the town would have the option of, painting them over or putting a new decoration on them. So,
Good. Any other comments or questions? Do we need to, I guess we do need to vote to approve this, don't we?
We do.
Do we have a motion to that effect?
We do. Move to accept the project proposal to paint the traffic signal boxes in West Concord and the project proposal of the installation of a poetry phone in West Concord.
Second.
Mr. Howell?
Aye.
And myself, Mary Hartman, aye. Ms. Escobedo?
Aye.
Mr. Dane?
Aye.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you very much, everyone.
We're moving right along.
We are.
It's time for the chair's report.
A chair's report.
The chair's report.
Okay, is that, all right, that must be me.
That's you.
I'll keep it brief. Couple of items which are more or less by way of announcement. The oral argument on the appeal in the Estabrook case is taking place on March 1st at the appeals court. And I don't know, it will be in person and open to the public. I don't know if it will be broadcast, but we can distribute the information for those people who would like to watch it. It will not be a long event because each side is given 15 minutes to present their argument. So that will move that case along, and at least it'll get us to the point where we're going to get closer to a decision on that case. Of interest with regard to our MBTA zoning, there is an event taking place tomorrow in the town of Milton where the town meeting accepted the zoning change under the act, and whatever their process was, it is now being put to a referendum, and there will be a vote in Milton tomorrow on whether or not to ratify the action that was taken by the town meeting. That comes along with the news that the MBTA itself is running very serious deficits to the tune of $685 million per year, and deficits that will be increasing over the years, which gives you some concern about the service, the transportation service that will be provided by the hubs that are the center of that zoning enterprise. One of the things that I found most surprising about that story was that only 15% of the revenues of the MBTA come from fares. That is to say, 85% of their revenues come from other sources. So that's something of interest to follow. The League of Women Voters Candidates Forum is on March 10th at 1 o'clock, and we have candidates for the Select Board, the School Committee, Town Moderator, and Housing Authority. I think that's all of them. And Megan brought you up to date on the work we're doing on dealing with the decommissioning of the MCI Concord. So I think that about covers it for me, unless there are any questions from the board. Okay. All right, so as they say, moving right along.
Liaison reports.
Liaison reports, okay? Who would like to go first?
Mar? Do you want to go first?
Sure, I can go first.
Go ahead.
Just quickly, the the Warner's Pond Task Force held its first meeting last Thursday evening. Consisted primarily of introductions introduction to the facilitators, and we'll be getting organized around the leadership of the task force, as well as the organization of the work itself when we meet next, which is expected to be within about a month. Also, the Climate Action Committee is organizing some green home tours, which will be opportunities for people who are interested in electrifying their homes to get learn from the experience of other residents in Concord and possibly also in neighboring Acton, who have made investments in electrification and projects to improve their homeowner efficiency. And I'll leave it there for now. Oh, actually, let me just cover two quick other things. The Hanscom Field Advisory Committee is going to be reviewing a draft environmental impact report on the Northfield project on February 20th at their meeting. That's open to the public on Zoom. if anybody wants to attend and hear that presentation. And the middle school building committee will be meeting later this week, and we'll get an update on that project status. Sorry.
Great.
Now I'm done.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Linda, do you have something?
Sure, I can go next. The Hanscom Area Towns Committee recently met, also talked about the February 20th DER that's going to be presented at HFAAC. There was a compliment to Concord in general from one of the community members represented at HATS, particularly related to how we've proceeded with preparing for the 250th anniversary. So that was nice to receive from them. The planning board is not one of my committees, but I did get to it recently, specifically to hear some of the general layout for proceeding with the MBTA communities, the zoning site plan rules and regulations, and the consultant was present to identify basically the scope and schedule for what is going to proceed. And the CHCD met, and I see Lee Smith is here again tonight, and as he commented at our last meeting, they did discuss at their meeting the very next morning the implications of, or began to discuss some of the early implications of the MCI announcement, and have decided to pause going forward with the RFP until September on that. However, for Junction Village, because what we may learn some more information over the coming months. However, I want to be clear that they also discussed that the Assabet River Bluff RFP is going to go forward. And I think that's the highlights of what I want to present right now.
Oh, thank you. Mary?
Okay. I'll go. Trails Committee. One of the stewards for the White Pond conservation area at White Pond and one of the members of the Trails Committee put together a sign that clearly delineates where the town beach is, because right now I think a lot of old timers within Concord know where the beach is, but apparently newcomers don't, and they were riding around in town and going through all of the roads and in the White Pond neighborhood. So the sign is up, it's beautiful, it's blue. So it was just such an obvious idea that we should put a sign to let people know where the beach is. So now there is a sign. The planning board, I also went to the planning board meeting. They met with some of the members of the DPW commission, and I think they made good progress towards agreeing on some of the rules and regulations specific to the scenic roads bylaw that the town passed at our last town meeting. The Solar Task Force, as you know, the Solar Task Force is looking for some quick wins as where they can install solar on municipal land based on a unanimous vote at town meeting. They're looking at the landfill. Apparently that's been delayed because the slope of that land requires some very specific contractors to help us put solar on the ground on that grade of property. So that's going to be delayed. The other two possibilities are at the high school, on the roof of the high school, and in the land in front of the high school, between the high school and the Beatty Center at the swale. Apparently at the school committee, and we have school committee members here that can confirm this or tell me I'm wrong, I think they voted to approve a feasibility study for solar on the roof. So it looks like that's going ahead. I went to the assessors meeting. The applications for the real estate, the residential tax exemption are still coming in. I want to remind people that the deadline is April 1st if you want to participate in that residential tax exemption this year. Once you apply, you don't have to reapply. So if you apply for FY24, you're automatically eligible for FY25. The Ag Committee, I think the last time I spoke, the Ag Committee had some concerns about the property tax on some of the property they use for rentals for the farm workers, and they did some more research and they found out that the increase in the taxes on those particular buildings were due to an increase of valuation. And then finally, I'm in the process of rewriting the charge for the Economic Vitality Committee for several reasons. The first is that we've hired a full-time economic development manager, which kind of changes the focus of the work the committee needs to do. We also have MCI Concord that came up, and I think I would like to have a strong voice from the economic development interests in town at the table when we're deciding what to do with MCI Concord. And then furthermore, I think that the Economic Vitality Committee should have a broader role. Right now, their role is pretty focused on tourism and retail sustainability, and I think it can be broader than that, and I think the times call for a broader role. So I will be working with them to rewrite the charge and bring it to the Select Board for our review and approval.
Good, thank you. All right. That brings us to the main item on our agenda for this evening.
We're early.
And since everybody is here, I don't see any reason that we should not just proceed rather than wait till 7 o'clock. So why don't we rearrange the stage here, and then we'll introduce everybody, and then we'll proceed. We have place cards for you.
I'm really glad I came early. In 1981, I was on the West Concord Center Study Committee.
You were.
And I was the chair of the Junction Park Committee.
Oh, jeez. Then why did you leave?
I lived in West Concord for 18 years.
Wow.
Victor is walking over, but we can start. We don't need to wait. He's walking over in Concord Center, so we should be here in a minute.
Okay.
Hi. Hi, I'm Mary Hartman.
I'm Lynn.
Lynn. Oh, you're going to go around.
Go around and introduce. This is, and it's good. We have power charts on the video. So.
Okay.
This is something of a unique event that we're engaging in this evening, which is a joint, which is a meeting that involves our select board, representatives of the town of Carlisle through their select board, and their finance committee. Kate Reed to my right, who is the chair of the Carlisle Select Board, and two representatives of your finance committee?
Yes, Lynn Lipinski, who is the chair of finance, and Victor Liang, who is walking from his car apparently.
He's en route.
Or driving in circles trying to find a parking spot, one or the other.
So, and then we have representatives of the Concord Finance Committee, Chris Reynolds, and on the video, Parashar Patel, who is the chair of the committee.
Sorry, I could not be there in person. I had a last-minute
Yes.
schedule change and needed to leave town before the snowstorm that disappeared.
Yes, good. And are you in DC now?
I'm in my hotel room in Washington, yep.
Yes, okay. And then we have the chairs of the two school committees, the Regional School Committee, Alexa Anderson, and Tracy Barrow, the chair of the Concord Public Schools. And
Henry, can I ask you a favor? Could you speak louder? I have trouble hearing you.
I will. See, I have my hearing aids tuned all the way up, so I sound very loud to myself. So, might be a sit next to the microphone too. So, what we're trying to do is to do some kind of joint examination of budgets and some joint examination of capital programs, because we're really all drawing water from the same well. And the quantity of water that's available in that well is not unlimited. So we don't really have competing interests. We have common interests, and those common interests are to make the most effective use of the resources that we have for the two towns, because we share a school system, and the interests of our educational system, and then the needs of the town itself for all of its other programs and facilities and capital needs that really are complementary to each other, because, you know, the schools don't work without a fire department or a police department, and if we don't have good schools, we don't have people to inhabit our towns, and if we don't have good roads, they can't get to school, and so on. So it's all just trying to work together to make the resources go as far as we possibly can make them go. And so we thought it would be a good idea to get everybody together one place to talk about how we're going to go forward in order to accomplish our goals, and try to keep our taxes reasonable, and to accomplish what we need to accomplish, and not be competing for resources, but working together to get what everybody needs. We asked the school committee to give us information on some of their budgetary issues, and they gave us a lot of information, and all of that, I think it's 116 PowerPoint slides, are in the meeting package for tonight, which was published online and is accessible to everybody. We are not going to put you through anything like 116 PowerPoint slides. Everybody knows how I love PowerPoint. When somebody says to me, "Oh, I'm sorry, we don't have a PowerPoint," I say, "Thank you." But anyway, so what we've done, we put together an outline that everybody at the table has, and Mary has played the key role in putting together that outline, and attached to that, copies of those PowerPoint slides that are relevant to that discussion. And so, Mary, how do you want to start?
I think it would be a good idea if the school committee started by briefly discussing some of the slides that we'd like to highlight, and then we'd open it up for a conversation.
Okay.
First with the regional operating budget, and I should just say that Alexa and I are not we have members of our committee here, but they're not allowed to speak because we're not in session. We weren't called in session, so we're going to do our best with what we have and what you're looking for. And we also received these Sunday night, so we actually haven't forwarded it to our committee, just so they know they are not in receipt of these slides. But these, they all came out. There are our own slides that were pulled out, if that's clear.
And we did not get your materials, I think, until Thursday.
Yes, because we had to review them at our meeting Tuesday night. So we just sent them, just so they know that these aren't new slides that we created for tonight.
Thank you.
So it looks like you'd like to talk about enrollment trends first. And the region, I'll just talk, maybe we should just go back and forth. Do you want to do the region first, or?
Each district separately, or would you like to talk about them concurrently?
What do you mean district? You mean Concord and Carlisle?
Concord Carlisle or
Concord
Concord
Carlisle or
Public?
Concord Public.
Well, sequence of events, we were going to talk about the high school operating first, then the high school capital, so we've pretty much got an agenda.
Perfect. So at CCHS, the enrollment trends from FY19 to FY23, you can see from the slide, it's the gray number. So that goes from 1281 in 2019, and it kind of goes up, it goes down, it's at 1229, but not really a significant shift in enrollment over the past 5 years. Did you have questions on enrollment?
No, keep going.
Oh, okay.
No.
Okay. Next slide. Here we have a slide of our per pupil expenditure data, and it compares us to the other districts that we compare ourselves to contractually. So you can see where Concord Carlisle is. We're at $24,823 per pupil. And our peer districts, you can see that a lot of them are in the $24,000 range. So although we're third, it should just be noted that they're all kind of close in that first half. Weston is clearly the outlier at $30,000 per pupil expenditures, and the state average is $20,100.
Can I ask a question about that? In one of your schedules, you list a debt service as one of the expenses. Do you include debt service on school debt in your per pupil cost?
So Dr. Hunter's with us, if you would allow for her to come up here and discuss
Well,
that.
I mean, you must know whether or
Well,
not-
we have with and without debt service. So the tricky part, so are you referring to Bob's memo from?
No, I think we're
Just in
referring
this
to
one?
this.
No, we're talking to
This,
this,
this.
about whether,
Those are just the state numbers, not including debt.
so they're not including debt?
No.
Okay. So
But I think the
this,
reason we use these numbers specifically is because they come from DESI. So, you know, for example, Carlisle likes us to look at things without debt. You guys like to look at things with.
With debt.
Sorry, they like to look at things with debt. You like to look at things without debt. So in order to ensure that we're comparing all these districts accurately, we use DESI data.
I understand that, and I understand that the state's interest in this is dealing with operational expenditures.
Right.
Because those are the ones that go directly into the school services. But the actual cost to the town per pupil is significantly higher because those numbers do not include the cost of carrying the debt to provide the capital resources.
Right. And these are the slides that we pull from DESI, so.
I understand.
Yeah.
But I just want to make it
Yep.
clear that that is what we're talking about.
Okay, next slide.
Do we actually have numbers with debt service included?
In this slide, no, but if.
No,
we
no,
go to-
I understand not in this slide. Can those numbers be provided
We won't
after
be able
this
to
meeting?
compare other districts, no.
Okay, and I'm not asking for a comparison either. I'm just asking for Concord, Carlisle, Concord.
I mean, of course we can calculate that, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
thank
we
you.
don't have that with us right now.
I understand, just after the meeting, if that can be provided, thank you.
Okay.
I just want to say one comment about per pupil expenditures also. If you put 100 more kids in the school, it might not cost you more for operating, and that would drop your per pupil. So this is not necessarily a wonderful measure. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but
I mean,
we understand that the incremental cost of each student is not the average.
That's, yeah.
It's not the average
Right.
True.
cost per student, because there are breakpoints. Like
Right.
at some point, you have one more student and you need to build a new school. And
Right.
so that student costs you $100 million.
If you get a student that is,
It's
you know,
more-
out of district, they can be a $250,000 cost per pupil. So, yeah,
Yeah.
to your point, it's a.
All right,
Yeah.
so
I mean, it's another point in your data set, but it's not necessarily
The point.
the point, yeah.
Yeah, right.
That's all I'm saying.
so,
Did you have any other questions on that before we move on?
well, I think, proceed.
Okay, proceed. I guess we're going to talk about the amenities building, and for those of you listening at home or in the room.
No, I think we should stop here and see if we have comments or questions
Okay.
about the operating budget for,
Okay.
okay, before we go to the
Yep.
second. thing. And I'll start. I have a question. When I went online to look at the staff for CCRSD, I noticed that a lot of staff is categorized as SPED. And I remember, Dr. Hunter, when you came to Concord 6-7 years ago, one of your goals was to bring more SPED in-house. And I thought the reason was, first of all, you thought that the students would get a better educational experience close to home. And you also thought that we would save money. And I'm wondering, do you think we've been successful in both of those goals?
Am I invited to the meeting? Because I've been asked to not participate. So
No,
I'm not sure. She was clearly asked not to participate.
I'm asking Dr. Hunter.
Go.
Would you like to come over to the microphone?
Thank you. Absolutely, I think we've accomplished those goals. We've built out programming, and I'll focus high school right now, in a number of categories so that we're able to maintain more students within district. Yes, that meant we, in some cases, had to expand staff, far less at the high school, honestly, than in K-8. But for every student that's out of district, that could have gone out of district that stayed in, we're saving hundreds of thousands of dollars. So the cost now is about cost avoidance and not incurring costs rather than direct savings back to the district. In many cases, there are some exceptions that we're still returning students, but in many cases, it's cost avoidance that we're able to house them in-house. So, yes.
So as a follow-on to that, what other initiatives do you have underway to save money at the high school?
We're constantly looking at how to save money. I don't think that that's an initiative. That's the lens and filter under which we operate. For example, staffing-wise, we calculate staffing down to the 0.25 FTE. We don't do it in whole FTEs. We do it based on the number of students that are signed up for particular sections and courses. So that's a constant for us. We staff to the incremental level of needs that we have based on what the students are taking. What's a good example of that is as we have students signing up for courses for the fall, which they're just finished doing, we will review where they've actually landed and where our course loads are, and we will make adjustments even now after the budget's done. So there's never a time we're not discussing how we're going to save funds and looking at ways in which to continue to do that.
On the, looking at the high school numbers, we have a reduction in the number of high school students from 1,309 to 1,254, which is 55, which if you multiply that by the operating cost per student, which is your $25 is per 25,000, we should be saving about $1.5 million on that reduction in the number of students, shouldn't we?
Would you like to answer? No, go ahead. I think that we can't look at it that way. I mean, 50 students, we have 4 grades at the high school. And so if you lose 20 students per grade, you might be losing a couple of kids per every class. And it's not an exact correlation between per pupil spending times the number of students for enrollment.
No, but I'm not saying that there be an exact correlation, but some of the savings that you have made in order to get to the guideline has been like to eliminate one math teacher, for instance. Okay. Now, I was interested in 2 things about that. One is that it was one math teacher, and that the savings for one math teacher was $135,000, and that is a number that is far higher than any of the salary figures on the schedules you give us for compensation. And so one of the things, another discontinuity here is that the numbers that are given for the salary ranges are not W-2 numbers. They are, salary numbers, which does not include really what the real cost per faculty member is. So there are, what you tend to see is that when there are increases in population, student population, the cost goes up per capita, and that when numbers of students decline, of course, I know you can't sell off a classroom, and you can't reduce staff except in units, but still, the cost always goes up. And if it's because of increasing population, it's per capita. If there's declining enrollment, it goes down, it goes up for the CPI or other factors. So, that's a concern about whether, how accurate the description of the cost savings is.
Yeah, I think there's a lot that goes on when we build the budget. That the math teacher you're referencing was a late change. After we had brought the budget to the school committee, we made an adjustment. So that really stands out.
Just a piece of information I picked up
Sure,
and go.
sure. There's a lot of that already had gone on before the school committee saw the budget. So we reduced a special ed teacher, for example. We reduced some tutor positions. We're constantly doing that look. And, the guideline that we're usually offered isn't enough to cover contractual increases. So we start the budget build knowing we have savings to identify through new initiatives, through staffing changes, through whatever way we possibly can in order to even come within close to the guideline, because the guideline doesn't actually address all of our staffing increases and the COLAs that we have to address. So that is an ongoing process for us. We're always looking to consolidate and make changes so that we're finding those savings through the work that we do to build the budget, which is part of, and I know some of you are probably familiar with the zero-based process that we use. That's how those savings come to be, because we don't just roll the budget over. We actually build it from the ground up every single time.
But to put this in perspective, we've been thinking very hard about how we can essentially build a sane budget for the town that people can afford to pay the taxes to support. And essentially 80% of the town revenues are spent on education when you take all of the joint costs and you put them in. So for those of us who are working on cutting costs in other areas, you sometimes get a sense of futility when you say, well, there's 80% of the budget that's out of your control.
Understood. I think we appreciate that. I just want to remind you that this is a 3.08 operational increase at the high school this year. So we share that same goal in trying to find a reasonable plan to work with in terms of the fiscal responsibility we own.
Well, I'd like to kind of hear from some of the other people, not dominate the conversation myself, but I'm trying to set the table.
Yeah, and I can tell you, Carlisle certainly appreciates the 3.08, but that does not include the debt service. So when you add that, and we are trying to keep our tax increase to 3%, so which means that right now where our budget lies, we have 200,000 that we have to look for, additional cuts we have to find. And we've been talking about how and where to find those. And we're not at 80%, we're at more, we always talk about our educational budget being at 2/3. However, that doesn't count the fact that the town is paying the benefits for the our CPS, not your CPS. So it's more than 2/3, but so we're talking about proportional cuts. So if we have to cut 200,000, and this department is at 5% of the budget, we would ask them to cut 5% of 200,000 rather than an across-the-board thing, because what we find is that the small departments are constantly looking for quarters in the couch cushions, and when there's a big budget over here, that's not cutting proportionally at the same sort of rate. But I'll let the FinCom.
Can I jump in to sort of talk about that? I think I fully understand what you're saying. So when you talk about that, the budgets are, 80% of any town's budget goes to education. Then when you look at the educational budget, our operating budgets, what's interesting is about 80% of our operating budgets are directly related to staff and to the COLA increases that we must manage in our contract negotiations. And what I found interesting was that like in 2015, so almost 10 years ago, the school's budgets were about 68% were staffing costs, salaries, bodies, people in the room. They've grown, obviously, now to 80%. So what I think we need to think about in that means that we are constantly cutting everything but salaries in our budget. So, so that is part of, I think, the exercise and why zero-based budgeting works well, because we recognize we can't always just carry over the programs and services. And a lot of those costs here in Concord anyway have been passed on to tax-paying parents in the form of, in 2015, parents did not contribute to school supplies. Now they do. The average parent in the Concord Public Schools, I think for school supplies, pays about $100 or so per student. Our activity fees have grown significantly in those 10 years. So when children are looking, or students are looking to participate in the extracurricular program, those fees. So we've cut all those things. And I think beyond that, I think the next conversation that both of our municipalities need to have is a serious conversation really about class sizes. Because what you're really talking about here is cutting staff. And if you look at DESE data, and specifically Boston Magazine, because I just have these numbers kind of ballparked in my head. Boston Magazine, when they rank high schools, because we're still talking about the region, they rank, I think, about 180 schools. It's the list. Concord Carlisle was 30 last year. We're generally in the top 10. And there was one metric where we were really a big outlier. I think we were ranked 150th, 160th, so very low. And it was class size. We are way out of whack, roughly by 20% or so with our peer districts. So already we have significantly larger class sizes than our peer districts. So we can have that conversation, but I think we need to be transparent about it and make sure that the community, if we are going to engage in that kind of thing, needs to really understand what that means.
I think your teachers need to understand what it means. You have a contract coming up, and there's some of they in fact are probably, well, I know the Carlisle ones are the highest paid, and they're, and they're highly paid because you guys settled before we did, and they wanted the same stuff. And we are what were we, did we say, Victor, the highest, not only just in the state, in the nation. So it might be that the teachers have to make some decisions as well. And you
Can I pick up right here, Alexa? You've heard this from me in previous conversations, and I think this is a good discussion to have around class sizes, because this notion that 80% of our spend is dictated and mandatory, I've always found puzzling, because in fact, we actually do have a choice around class size. And it's interesting to note, up until now, we did not hear about what was driving the drop in the ranking, and it turns out it's class size, I guess. Can you share the numbers? You talked about 20% higher class size, I guess, is probably the way to describe it.
Most peer districts are about 15.
Well, can we, rather than doing about, et cetera, it would be helpful, the peers that you typically use, as committees use in terms of the surrounding towns, et cetera, and actually having dollar or class sizes sent later, because I think this is a good conversation to have.
You have that presentation from last year, Parashar. We gave that to you guys. It's in a PowerPoint. I can resend it.
That would be excellent. And is that a trend? I can't remember. Was that a trend analysis or just 1 year?
It was a snapshot in time from I think the 2022 data from DESE.
And then I guess if we're talking about rankings, I mean, the other thing that I have to say too is they use a number that 72% of our kids go on to
a four-year college, which we know is not an accurate number. That number is the number that DESE has, and they use the same number this year as they had last year. So that also has impact on our rankings.
Is the DESE information submitted by the school committees?
It is not. It's
Well-
actually pulled from some of it is.
All of it is except the college.
No. So that 72% number, they're pulling from a national clearinghouse. And
I see.
we have tracked it down, we have tried to change it, and what happens in those rankings, if they don't have the information, they use last year's information. So for example, when we didn't give MCAS in the pandemic, they used the previous year, and they still reported MCAS scores because they used the previous year of data.
And Parashar, I think in that same presentation that we gave to you last year, if DESE were to use our own internal data, the number of students from the class of 22, I think at the time was what we were discussing, that went to four-year colleges, I believe was 91 or 92%. So the National Clearinghouse was off by about 20%.
Yep.
It's
that's fine.
noting that many other districts have inaccurate data there as well.
Well,
But
And by class size, we're talking about students per teacher, correct?
these were students who would go on from any
No,
from
no,
a
I'm talking
graduating.
about the class. I
Oh,
understand, I understand.
yes, well, the
clearinghouse
class
data
size
fine.
was really more
Well,
to answer Kate's question about the hard conversations I think we need to have.
The issue really, we're not really concerned about
Right.
ratings.
Right. We were talking about the class sizes and that
We're
19.
talking about class size and where that data comes from. And it would be surprising if, given the community we have and the resources we have and the parents and their education we have, if we didn't have 91% of our students going on to four-year
Yeah,
college.
but I think to Kate's point, you need to socialize it with the teachers. I think you also need to socialize it with the taxpayer.
When
So
we
I-
did our last, our last negotiation with the CPS, we found that our teachers were paid on average $5,000 to $7,000 more per year than any other teacher in the state. So even if we had frozen their salaries for 2 or 3 years, then they would have just been at parity with everybody. So we're not Newton here, right? So I think I'm just going to encourage you that, you're going to have to do a tough negotiation when you're negotiating. Because things are not going to get easier in the next 2 to 4 years. They're going to get much, much harder. And we are facing, in our town, getting up towards our levy limit. We have lots of capital items. And so we really need to get some assurance that we'll have some help from everybody in town so that we can things.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
That was actually at the top of my mind before you even talked about it, but what is the average class size right now in the high school?
19 to 1.
It's 19?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mary?
And we're talking about, schools' expenses as a percent of total budget and personnel costs as a percent of the educational costs. So I'm wondering, what is the teaching load at the high school? Is the teaching load for the teachers
So
at the high school the same as it is across the state, or is it lower?
So our teaching load right now at the high school, our teachers teach 4 classes. There are other districts that teach 4 and some teach 5. But I guess I'm just going to say right now that we are in the middle of contract negotiations, so this gets a little uncomfortable in the conversation. I think we're hearing you.
My only point is that if we're thinking of ways that we could get more from a lower teacher's cost, that is one lever that we have.
And as far as the impact on your negotiations go, the fact that this is something that is being talked about seriously here in front of everybody should give you some leverage to say that you have support for being tough in the negotiations.
And I
have to
think
say,
everyone's aware of
I think
that.
we're all aware of that.
Well, there's...
Do you have data on how many districts have a 5-class teaching load versus a 4?
Not right now, not tonight. I
Can
mean,
you
it's
get- can-
certainly.
I know
mean,
that.
I mean,
Can you-
these are
can you get
certainly
it?
things that this would be helpful to have. Like, it was very challenging for us to prepare for tonight.
That's fine. No,
Knowing,
no.
you know, you were broadly looking at, we didn't know exactly what you were looking for, which is why you did get 180 pages. So we tried to give you, you wanted the budget, we gave you the
But
budget.
you didn't give us this. But you didn't give us this.
know you
It's
wanted
okay,
it.
it's
I know
okay.
you
No,
wanted
I
it.
wasn't thinking of tonight. It wasn't like, do you have this in your back pocket? Again, to Henry's point, when you're in negotiation, maybe if you had that data, that might help your position.
We're fully aware of the data.
And, you know,
yes.
stress
You
leads
do
to
have,
some.
so you do have that data?
I'm sure it
Yes,
exists.
it
yeah.
exists.
Oh, but you don't have it.
It exists. We don't
Okay.
have it right in front of us right now. no.
Okay.
Yeah.
And stress
One-
leads to
one
some level of candor and creativity. So it's good to be able to, have to fly.
I'll just say I don't want to touch negotiations in this conversation
No.
right now.
Well, but
I think that, I think it's
No, but
just
it's-
something,
it's
we have to
critical.
bargain in good faith also. And I just think that we can't really discuss it in a public meeting. We hear you.
Can I just add some context here? Because I think, hopefully we all around the table don't think of this as a one-off conversation, but hopefully the start of a dialogue over the next several years, because one conversation, from my perspective, is not going to sort of change the direction of the ship, if you will. And so Tracy, to your point, I'm not expecting you to have all these numbers here, but hopefully if we can have fact-based discussions over the next few months and years to think about class size, think about other factors, I think that would be helpful. And hopefully this is the start of that conversation. So whatever numbers you have later that you can share, that would be helpful.
True.
Any other comments? Should we move on?
Move on.
Just,
I have one technical question, just because I've been doing a little digging. Can you, mathematically, I understand the difference between class size and the number of teachers per student, but from an education perspective, how are those two ratios used? They're different ratios. I'm just kind of curious, how are they used as you think about education policy, class size, staffing, et cetera?
Well, and I'll just talk high school because it's different at each level. At the high school, I'm actually going to put those numbers aside because the way we do it is to look at the number of kids in every section or in every program, especially in special education, and how many adults are there and how many we believe there should be. So we are in every setting looking at that ratio, trying to be sure that it's supportive of what students need and fiscally responsive to the budget we're trying to bring to you.
So is
Right,
there
but
different?
technically, I guess the
Oh, sorry,
difference
no.
is, so you talked about 19-to-1 class size at the school. If you go to DESE and you take a look at the students per teacher ratio, it's actually 12. So that's why I'm trying to understand and reconcile those two numbers in my mind.
Yeah, my perspective on that is the lead teacher in the classroom, which is that 19-to-1 ratio.
Okay.
Those are our lead teachers. So when we talk a lot about, those are all teachers with master's educations. They are our highest paid staff in the classroom. The way I think correctly and smartly and with fiscal responsibility in mind, you mitigate some of the way you interact with students and ensure that you support students are by bringing in very talented, obviously, other kinds of staff, tutors, support staff, so that in any given classroom, you have your sort of more experienced, master's educated lead teacher with supporting staff to ensure that some of those higher needs students get the instruction and support they need. And generally, those staff are not at quite the same pay scale. So you are able to at once keep the taxpayer in mind while still effectively supporting students where they are.
So that's what's in the DESE number?
For-
One includes aides and tutors and so forth.
Well, and we're going to pull the formula for you because that will be the most specific. They're actually, DESE's live pulling from us daily student schedules and teacher schedules. So they can actually see period by period which adults and which kids are in a classroom. So they're using a really complex formula to get through all of this because they're gathering so much data now. To Alexa's point, the 19-to-1 is more reflective of what a day in a student's life looks like. The 12-to-1 would be compiling everybody into one bucket and dividing it out, which of course isn't how a high school runs.
So what you have a class size, but in many classes you have more than one teacher, so that your student-teacher ratio
Yes.
doesn't tie in very closely to your class size.
Well, in some
criteria.
situations, those are in legally mandated programs. So you might have tutors that are providing IEP service. And so it's not really as though you have two teachers co-teaching in the classroom and you're supporting students, but you still have that roughly 19 students in a class.
Okay. So.
I have a question before we move on. If
The
you don't
only
mind.
reason, I'm sorry, go ahead, Lynn.
Oh, I was just going to
Wait-
quickly
wait,
ask.
Carissa.
So I'm assuming, based on your comment, that the ratios of teacher to student is really based on the program? And could I assume that the more acute needs would require not necessarily, I'm assuming you also leverage the level of education of that teacher based on the program? And would you,
Some of the
your
more
question.
intensive programs, you're going to have more teachers in those programs. So
Mhm.
that's just an average. That's an average of what our classes look like.
So I'm assuming in the programs that require more help, if you will, it's not necessarily that in a classroom you'd have two master's level teachers. You would have a master's level potentially, and then some other people that just help in that respect, whether
Yep,
it's
and I will say
paras
that
or.
a lot of our tutors actually are master's level. They have master's degrees and they are tutoring. They are licensed. They are licensed educators, and they're making a lot less money than our teachers are.
So do you consider them paras, or do you call them tutors?
Tutors is the-
Tutors.
Is that the right? Okay.
Yep.
We've been slowly shifting more toward assistants, which is a lower qualification and less pay, but we're doing that over time and trying to see where that makes sense versus just hiring only tutors.
Chris, did you have any questions or observations?
I just have a comment. So I appreciate what the school committee and the superintendent has done in looking at the different categories of the budget to try and meet the guideline. I've seen the most recent adjustments. But as I look through, I guess a question and a comment, as I look through both at CPS and at the high school, we can stay on the high school, a number of the ways that we're making it is not necessarily sustainable, right? So we're playing with OPEB, which is okay. I get it. We have interest income that we were able to assume some higher rates on. So there's some things that may not be recurring that are in the number, right, that help us meet it. And then you'll see some of the same stuff at CPS. And so getting back to some of the comments that the other members of the select board were saying, I think I applaud you. I can see that you're working hard to get there, and I appreciate that. But I really worry that it's not sustainable, right? And at some point, we're going to really have a problem. And one thing I would ask to think about, and this happens in the corporate world all the time, and I see us doing it with respect to capital projects, is you can hire people who will come in and help you understand where you can find efficiencies in your operations. And businesses do it all the time. I don't know if schools do it or municipalities should do it or don't do it. I think they should. I think there's ways to get efficiency that perhaps, and I appreciate, I think zero-based budgeting is excellent, and it's a good way to also get a hold of it. But there may be other opportunities that we just don't see because we're in the weeds all the time. But I really think we're going to need to get there, because I don't think it's sustainable, and I don't think that you mentioned you think you're going to hit an override. I think we are. So I think we're going to, and that doesn't mean it wouldn't pass, but it's still going to put us in this position where we're always going back, and I'm worried about it. So.
And we do a lot of work with we have a chairs roundtable that we meet with once a month, and we have talked to other chairs of surrounding districts, and we are one of the most reasonable districts this year. We have 3 districts looking for overrides. I mean, Acton's looking for one, Belmont's looking for one, Sudbury had an override last year. The asks of the schools are around 7% in a lot of the places. It's 6%, it's 4%. we're at guideline at CPS. I guess I just have to say that out loud, that, we're trying to bring you budgets that are reasonable, and we're at guideline at CPS. We're technically under guideline at the region, because the guideline was 3.26. So we're certainly happy to continue to have these conversations, as we should,
Yeah.
right? We have to bring responsible budgets.
Right.
And we're really trying to do that. We heard it loud and clear last year. We really made the effort to meet the guideline this year. But, I looked around, and, I'm just looking around at 8%, 3.4%, 6%. Bedford, they've typically gone 3.5% every year, they're up to 6%. So everybody is feeling it, and everybody's having the same pressure. But I do think that our superintendent and our assistant superintendent of finance really listened. And when we did our budget planning this year, they took that into consideration. And we're going to continue to do that.
I know, I'm just telling you, but
Totally.
if the way you get there is by OPEB and interest income, it's not sustainable, Tracy.
Right.
So that's
Right, and that's why, yeah.
So, and I don't know that those towns are going to get those increases, right?
I don't know if
Because you
they are
saw,
either.
right, Newton got a no
Yeah.
on a 2.5 for the schools. So there was a big fight over the contract, right? So I think you're going to start to see some pushback in some of these communities, but I don't know. I can't
Yeah.
predict what other towns are going to do. But for us, we've had 3 years where we couldn't hit the guideline. This year we are on CPS, which is really good. But I know how we're doing it, right? So the question is, without getting at the staffing issue, if it's an issue, or the ability to fund staffing as you'd like it. And I know you have good reasons for how you want to staff the schools. We're going to keep coming back with taxes that I think are higher than we think that are sustainable. So that's really the question for us. Is how
Right,
we
and I
get-
think that's why we go back to, I think, what the elephant in the room, I think, is the question of class sizes. And are we ready to have that conversation as a town? Because to your point, I don't see, I think the superintendent, what she's done is, I think commendable, she always talks about trying to keep cuts as far away from students as possible. And I think that has been traditionally what you've seen in our budgets. Whether, to your point, that is sustainable for 1 more year, 5 more years, 20 more years, we'll see. But I think it's commendable that she's done it. I think they'll continue to try and do that as best as possible. And also, too, I don't know if Lori wants to speak to this. This budget is not without FTE cuts this year. So, it isn't just, finessing with OPEB. We've done, we know what some of the problems are, the ones we're speaking about, and they have been addressed. So we're starting to do that work. And I don't know if you want to speak to that more.
Well,
But
as part of the zero-based, and where we can see there's more staff, I hate to say it so simply because it's not that simple, more staff than we need, we are making those reductions. Right now, we're in the active discussion of whether attrition is going to take care of it, which frankly, we're always hoping, but I have about 5 people that are going to get told they may be ripped because we are actively doing that work. I think you're all right. Is it sustainable? The needs of the kids are probably at record highs of what we've seen in my 25 years as an administrator. And that comes with needs and supports that certainly cost money. And that's a wide-ranging need. And what's the community's level of service delivery that you're looking for? I was in a district when the cliff happened in 2009 that went to class sizes of 30-something. And the override didn't pass the first time. And it wasn't until those class sizes hit that people realized what that really meant in the ballot box. And, I don't think we want to be in that position where we're putting the worst case in front of our kids and then saying, oh, that's what we were talking about. I think that's the point of tonight, is to start to put it out there earlier.
But it may very well be that the dislocation takes place in various aspects of the community, and the dislocation that occurs in the school system is not the only impact, because as taxes go up, that creates dislocation in the community, because the people who can't tolerate that level of taxation leave, okay? And that is a very serious form of dislocation, and it does affect the community very deeply, probably at least as much as the quality of the education that the children get. Because, I mean, we are the people who live in this town, and we represent them, and we serve them. And if what we're doing is running a town which essentially excludes people and pushes them out because they can't afford to live here, that's a very serious consequence.
Couldn't agree more. And I think another thing that I think is particularly challenging that school administrators are facing, we talk a lot about diversity, and a type of diversity that we don't talk about very often is neurodiversity, and the extent of the neurodiverse children in our schools today is wildly different than even 10 years ago, and certainly like mind-blowingly different than when I was in school here in Concord. So our budgets reflect that, and in a lot of times they're sort of government mandates that are along with that come along with those how we have to educate those kids. A lot of and as Dr. Hunter said, we're building programs that are both ethically correct because we're keeping those kids in their communities. They're fiscally responsible, but they're not free, and they do have costs. So I think that is a big piece of what we're doing here, and I think it's the right thing to do. But to suggest that it comes with no cost is,
I don't think anybody here is suggesting that.
What?
So
Okay.
do we want to move on,
I think
Mary?
we should.
Okay,
Can I just make one comment, Henry? I think, first of all, I commend the schools back 4 or 5 years ago in developing a strategic plan. I think that was well done and important. I think if we're going to have these conversations about class size, et cetera, I think it'll also be important to lay out what our expected outcomes are. Because so far the conversation has been around the spend, and we haven't really talked about what our objectives are around outcomes. And so I would encourage the school committees to develop a new plan, because the current one ends in 2023. So hopefully the new one will incorporate some smart goals around objectives so that we can have some conversations to help us navigate the next 5 years to figure out, what is the impact or what could the potential impact be on outcomes as we maybe change class size or make other adjustments. Because without having a sense of what we want to achieve, I think it's hard for us to have these conversations and talk about the impacts by focusing only on spending. So I would just encourage school committees, as you think about developing a new plan, to make sure that there's some smart objectives for the next 5 years as well.
Parashar, we actually re-upped the plan last spring, so in the first year of 5, and there are measurable outcomes attached to that, so it's on the webpage. I'm happy to send it to you.
It would, because I just went to the website and I only found 20.
Well, the website's a problem that we're fixing. You're going to have a new website in the fall.
summer.
So I will find it and link it for you because it's hard to find.
Fair enough. It wasn't up there right now. Thank you.
I don't want to let the Chris's observation pass without getting further notice, and that is the potential value of getting consulting services in order to actually make a disinterested evaluation of the of cost effectiveness and whether or not the extra dollars that you spend on various elements of the education are actually productive, because as you know, in any enterprise, merely spending more money does not necessarily produce a better product. And sometimes you get a better product by having to actually focus on what you're really trying to accomplish and putting those resources to what is going to make a difference instead of just assuming that more money gets you better results.
Right, so just a few examples of where we've done that. There isn't a place that does like the district from soup to nuts. You have to pick a category. So with the bus, the transportation's been reviewed in my tenure and validated that this is a cost-effective way to run it where we don't outsource and we keep them. And then SPED, we do it program by program, and we've just last year had some outside consultants in to look at a thread of the programs and how we're running them and what we could do, both programmatically but fiscally too and staff-wise, and do it as efficiently as possible as well as effectively. So you're not wrong. It's not a one-shop stop to go get that, but we're always looking for input.
Mary, okay, now let's move on.
Can we?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
So here we have the amenities building. We've talked about this a lot. The amenities building is the fancy word for a bathroom. So it's a bathroom facility down by Memorial Stadium. And a little bit of the history is that when CCHS opened in 2015, there was some type of structure. None of us were there at the time, and we don't really know what it looked like. But when they renovated the fields, the structure was removed. And basically through the fields renovation, which was about a $5 million project, that was all, you know, it was a partnership between CC at Play and the district. They did not have enough money to construct the bathrooms. So we have had.
So there's no money left from that $5
No.
million? It's all gone?
No, it's
Okay,
gone.
that's my question.
And if there is any, it might be in the tens of thousands. I don't even know.
Okay, yeah.
They still have a board in place. We do know that. We are looking to them, hopefully. We were talking about fundraising for the track. Like, we do not want to come to the town looking for money for the track. We are hoping that maybe that board will be reinvigorated and want to do some serious fundraising for a track. So the portable restrooms, we rent them. We've rented them since the building was constructed. We bring in more bathrooms for graduation or for larger scale events. Over the summer, we do have some camps that rent from us, but they pay for their own restrooms to be brought in. So that's just kind of the way it stands at the high school. So that's your brief history into the amenities building. And you do the next slide. That's what it looks like right now. So we have those lovely 3 porta potties. One is handicap accessible. It is accessible, yes, in that it is larger, but if you look at the ADA compliance of it, if you need to have a certain amount of turning space for a wheelchair to be in that restroom, and it's either 180 or 360, depending on if you want it to be accessible or compliant. And you know, it's not ideal for anyone that's in a wheelchair, and we do have students in wheelchairs. We have people that come to visit in wheelchairs, and it is challenging, and there's no lighting in there. And then there's a concessions area that there's a pop tent that goes up during games. So that's what it looks like right now. Next slide. What will it look like? We have information, it's a schematic of what Gale and Associates did for us. It is literally a cement block building, I would have to say. It's square, there's nothing fancy about it. It has the number of restrooms that are necessary, and some of the slides are not here, but in the full presentation, you can take a look at that. 44 bathrooms are necessary under the plumbing code because our stadium has 1,800 seats. We will apply for a variance, so that number will be cut in half, but that is the plumbing code requirement. I know it seems excessive, and it is excessive. We don't want 44 bathrooms. We don't necessarily want 22, but once you have a stadium with an 1,800 person capacity, that is what you have to build.
So who says that?
The plumbing code.
Who's the plumbing code?
The
Is it a state or the
Massachusetts
town?
It's a state.
It's a state requirement?
Yep, state
And it's
requirement.
specific to stadiums?
Stadiums.
And I presume they think you're having beer sold or something, right?
No, it's, I
Why
think
would
that
they need 42
stadiums.
bathrooms?
Because it's a public space, so it's stadiums, it's auditoriums, I looked into it again last night, and it's really any place where people gather publicly.
So we already built the stadium.
The stadium was existing, so
Yes.
they did not change the size of the stadium when they renovated the fields.
Correlates to the number of people that can sit in the bleachers that exist.
Okay.
And if you take down those bleachers, let's say you wanted to alter that.
Yeah.
That sounds like a great idea, except with their grant, you would have to have a lot more
Well-
handicap compliance there too.
So Whalen built
So
an
if you went
elevator.
under a certain number, you wouldn't need this? Is that what you mean?
So Doug White's a great example. There really isn't bleacher seating up there,
Right.
so you get away with the far fewer restrooms.
Okay.
It's the bleachers that are driving it.
So we have 1,800 seats?
1,800 seats
And
is what our
that
bleachers
requires
hold.
the 42? And if we had
Yes.
1,200 seats, what would be
It would,
required?
it's a calculation. It's,
It
I
would
think
go
it's
down.
one.
Ratio,
It would
yeah.
go down. I think it's 1 per
It
30.
doesn't go to zero. There isn't something you
No.
get under a number and you don't
No.
need it anymore?
No,
Do we fill those bleachers?
no, but it
No, we
doesn't
don't.
matter.
Can we remove some of them?
No.
Then you have to make
Well,
them handicapped compliant. That's going to be a big cost.
When
to
you,
that.
when, as soon as you alter the bleachers, because we saw this in Wayland, they had to build an elevator on their bleachers.
Okay, don't
And
wanna do
so we
that.
have a current ramp,
Got it.
but
Yep.
they need an elevator.
Isn't that good enough that they can just sit down on the front row?
And I will say, it is actually, it is
Yeah.
full on
Yeah, we do
many of
fill
our football games, it is full. It is full on the Kicks for Cancer events that you'll see, you know, we have thousands of people that enjoy our campus for Kicks for Cancer. So there are many days that it is completely full,
So how many porta potties have we had there?
3, and then graduation,
And-
you bring in
and
for
the-
the larger ones, I don't
And
know,
so.
10, 12.
So we've had 3, and the plumbing code requires 44. Why aren't we all in jail now?
No, it's permanent, once it's permanent.
Well,
What?
Okay.
the
Well-
answer to
Once
that
it-
is the
Well-
plumbing inspector, which I
So in
don't
other
think we
words,
want to talk
we could
about.
have
here.
3
Good site.
temporary or 44 permanent, and that's the
Well,
choice?
No, no, it's
two.
a little more nuanced.
The difference is only about $2 billion plus.
Right, right.
The truth is, you are not in compliance with the code. You could get cited on that at any moment. There's choices that have been
Liability,
made not to
okay.
cite you on that, us
Sorry,
on
can I
that right
just-
now.
So can we,
What code are
okay,
we,
let's,
what code are we talking about here?
Massachusetts
I just-
plumbing code.
No,
Not
no,
the
well,
town.
hold on. So from what I understand, what I've just heard, and some other conversations I've had with other folks, the plumbing code only applies if you actually have a building there.
No.
Absent the building, as Henry pointed out, and Tracy just said, if you don't have a building, you're not out of compliance with any plumbing code.
No, I don't believe that's the case at all. We are required to have restrooms within a certain
Certain
distance of the
distance.
stadium, and we do not right now.
But these
But we've had it
restrooms,
for 8 or 9 years, right?
Because there's folks not citing us on it, even though they
They're not citing us by choice.
okay, okay.
I have
let's slow
another
down.
different kind of question. Have you considered a prefab building, which is a much cheaper form of construction, which would be just as adequate? I mean, I can't imagine that a concrete block building will be very beautiful in itself, so have you looked at any other options? Is
So-
what the question.
So this was the option. So the Campus Advisory Committee got together in 2018, and this was the recommendation, this was the schematic, this was part of the plan. So that was the option that was presented to us. Of course, if we could do it cheaper, 100%. Westford did the same exact building in 2021 for about $1.1 million or $1.3 million, and their Community Preservation Act money paid for the entire project.
Right, and that vote was rejected twice at the
Twice.
town
Correct.
meeting,
Yep,
right? It
at
was
the
very
town meeting.
controversial in
It
the
was
town.
very controversial.
Right,
So
so it's
is-
not going to be easy here either. So I
Yeah.
think the suggestion of coming up
Yep.
with an option
Yes.
even
Yes.
is really necessary, because that much money for bathrooms, for something that we've had it this way for a long time, I don't think is going to be easily saleable. So you need to have other options. There must be other options. If we added, I looked up online, ADA compliant or what looks like very nice accessibility porta potties are for $8,500. You can have a beautiful one with a ramp, and you could get 10 of those and increase your accessibility. It may not meet the other requirement, but it would be $100,000. So I think where are the other options? I understand we might like the one you're giving us better, but
frustrated.
I think you need other options.
Harry?
I don't know the cost of this. there was no cost data in your presentation. Can you tell us?
$2.3 million.
Is that the total?
Yep,
Or is
that's the total.
That's what
And
you're,
it's
or is that just
1,650
Concord's
feet?
portion? So why?
No, that
It's-
is inclusive
It's
of
Consider
six,
drawing.
yeah, if it's on the slide, then
It's
that's
less
what
to
it is.
And
cover
so that would be
1.7, I
1,400 a
think.
square foot. That seems very,
So
very
the warrant
low.
calls for
It
the whole.
boils down to $100,000 per stall.
More than that, yeah, but
It's just, it's not that simple. I think it's, like, it does boil down to that. I had a
It does
hearing.
boil down to that.
I know,
Go to
we
the
are,
public, that's what you're going to hear at the
Yes.
hearing.
I think what we're saying is we haven't looked at other options. We're going with a very old design, and we haven't updated that to think of, are there new technologies? Are there better ways to do it and less expensive ways to do it?
And
I think that's
also-
what you're hearing.
Also, now we're moving the major athletic facilities farther away from the football field, and what is going to need to be provided for the soccer fields and all those that are up the hill on the other side of
There's
the
bathrooms.
so there are
building?
bathrooms up there already.
There are
So up at the
bathrooms
Doug White, there are bathrooms up there already.
Yes.
I would,
Permanent
I would,
It's a
structure.
permanent
I would like to-
structure up
About
there.
moving,
I would like
how
to-
much would it cost to move the stadium up there?
I'd like to approach this a little bit differently rather than talking about the specifics, which are good questions, and thinking of alternatives. But I want to go back to more of a process question. And the capital planning task force 2 years ago put out a report, and they had several recommendations. But the central recommendation was that annually the town and the schools would come together and we would talk about what are our capital needs, so that we could avoid surprises, so that we could minimize the impact to taxpayers, because taxpayers are upset about their bills right now. And in September of 2022, not last September, but the September before that, we had our first meeting. And we came to the select board came to the Ripley School, and we sat down, and the town manager had a very thorough presentation that showed that we had backlog in public works investments. We had a backlog in public safety investments because over these past decades, we spent most of our capital money updating our schools. And so she put that together, and the dates were really unclear, and the estimates were big numbers, but they weren't really very well polished numbers. And then we turned to the schools and we said, "And what are your capital needs going forward?" And what we heard was your capital need was the middle school, and that was your need. And basically, so you were saying that we needed the middle school, and you were at the time you were looking for another $10 million for the middle school. And then you said, and that would be good because our schools are done. And I interpreted that conversation as there was a recognition in that room that because a lot of the town's requirements had been put on hold for decades, and the schools were taking a huge bite out of the capital apple, if you will, to fund the middle school, that now there was a recognition that money should be set aside to start funding some of the other capital needs that benefit the entire town, not just the school population, but the entire town. Was I wrong in my interpretation of that conversation?
So, Mary, in that conversation, we were abiding by the specifications of the capital planning task force. We were talking about capital needs in excess of $5 million. That was a tier 3 conversation only. So I think that's probably where the misunderstanding was. And I know that the tiers have been revised now.
Right.
But for the purposes of that conversation, we're still not planning to bring anything in excess of $5 million.
Okay, but then when we met again in December, this just past December, which, as you just said, it was all the tiers, we didn't hear that either. That was not brought up in that conversation. So again, I interpreted that as a kind of a recognition that it's time to start putting some money away so that we can fund all these things that have been on hold for such a long time. And that wasn't mentioned in our December meeting, which you came here in December, and we had our capital meeting, and that wasn't mentioned. So again, I'm wondering, does the school recognize, and am I misremembering or misinterpreting? Because does the school recognize that the town has some serious capital needs that have been put on hold, again, for decades, that would benefit the entire town, not just the schools, and that put money in services that we all use? So I guess that's my first reaction when I see this 2.3 million that, again, wasn't brought up, and that is my first reaction.
So we have talked about this since, I think we voted on it in October or November. But in 2021, the Capital Planning Task Force, it was understood that the restrooms were part of
the future plan. So I went back and I looked through all the documents. I think it was Appendix D. I'm not even completely certain right now. But this amenities building was always part of that discussion. So I think it was assumed that, you know, this was part of completing the high school. It was the road, it was the lighting, it's the bathrooms. And the track is, believe me, is a nice to have, and we totally recognize that. We wouldn't be asking taxpayers for that. We're looking to fundraise for a track at our high school. Now, when you look at this amenities building, you look at all the other towns that we compete with, every other town has a permanent bathroom facility, and it is for the community. Our fields are used by everyone in the community. We have grandparents there, we have children from other towns there. We have events that we rent out, that people actually use our space for tournaments and things like that. And I think that I feel as though we're sending the wrong message by saying, we have no bathroom here, so if you need to use a wheelchair and go into a bathroom, we don't use the high school. It's too far away from it. So this was part of completing our process, and that's what we assumed it was. We put forth, this is a warrant article, yes, because it has to pass in both towns. It has to pass at both town meetings, and it has to pass at the ballot, and we understand that, and we understand there's definitely going to be a hurdle to the town, and I think, you know, that the taxpayers are at town meeting, and I think they do have to make that decision. Like, is this something that's necessary or not? I feel as though it's our duty, I mean, I'll only speak for myself, I do feel it's our duty and responsibility to follow through on what the original intent was for that space, and it's been since 2015, and we're still, you know, kind of limping along with these porta potties.
Yeah, and I think too, Mary, like, when I think about Concord, and we do talk so much about Concord being a place where people desire to age and retire here. My parents are among those people. Tracy's parents are among those people. My in-laws are among those people. But I think one of the things that gets lost from this conversation is all of those people, because their grandchildren are here, they're at the high school, they are all using those fields. You know, my parents, you see a lot of septuagenarians and octogenarians on that campus all week, and not just during football season, on the baseball field. You know, so I think it is.
No, I understand.
I think to call it just for students is neglecting that.
I understand, but I also understand that there's only so many capital dollars to go around.
No,
okay?
and I understand that too.
And a lot of the capital dollars now are being spent on people who either have kids in school or are grandparents of kids in school, and most of the people in town don't have kids in school, right? I don't know whether they're grandparents or not. I don't have that data. And the services that they're requesting, which is better roads, right? People who work in facilities that actually don't leak, okay? People that work in facilities that aren't so crowded they have to leave the room if they want to turn around. Those are the things that I think have been on backlog for so long, and I guess I misunderstood. I thought we had an understanding that it was time to fund those things. And and again, the fact that it wasn't brought up in December.
Mary, I'm not sure what happened. I left this meeting in December surprised that it hadn't been brought up, so I think we just missed each other somehow, that we hadn't
Well, I
talked
thought it was up
about
to you
it.
to bring it up.
Well, so I was waiting the other way around, I think, because we were going in order. So I think we just missed each other. There was no intent there. At least I could say that for myself.
I build a little bit on what Mary said around process, because I agree with many of Mary's points. And I guess looking at this particular project is a good example of the lack of process. So first of all, some questions I have myself that I haven't been able to quite answer is, A, it's very clear that there have been no alternatives examined. So if you take a look at a typical capital planning process, you're looking at different alternatives. Right now, we're being asked to fund, or we will be asked to fund, a 3 million, 2.3, 3 million, whatever, and that's just an estimate. Likely to go up, maybe go down, but it's an estimate. Likely to, ask to support a building where A, no alternatives have been considered. It's being put forward because it was in the original plan, which, by the way, 8 or 9 years ago, financial circumstances were different. Right, and then I noticed today, again for the first time today, at least for me, was the original intent was for private funding, and now we're going to public funds. all of those elements are of concern. And then the third element is, oh, by the way, we're gonna undertake a capital needs plan for the entire high school next year, but fund this now. So I guess one of the questions I really have, I understand that all this potential of ADA compliance, et cetera, but, you know, it's a bit hypothetical, to be perfectly honest, since we've been at this way for 8 years. And again, without any sense of what alternatives we could have to be in compliant, why not wait a year, get the needs assessment done, figure out where this sits in the priorities, take the time to look at alternatives, and then come up with a plan, right?
I think,
And
because then you're looking at a
overall,
$3 million
step
building.
back,
Well,
as
we don't
we
know.
step back,
I don't think we know.
as we step back, take a look at the needs of what the schools need, balance it with the needs of what the towns are, and again, have a town-wide perspective of what capital projects we ought to fund and in what year. But right now, it just seems, oh, well, all of a sudden, we now can fund this. It just comes out of the blue. And frankly, I'm uncomfortable what might come out of the blue next year with a needs assessment.
So we're not undertaking a needs assessment next year, just for clarity. We don't have, I mean, it wouldn't be for at least 2 years. That was the discussion. It's 2 years plus, because the high school is only, it's not even 10 years old yet.
Well, so that underscores my point. I mean, 2 years from now, you know, who knows what else is gonna come up?
Well,
So
and
why
then I
not
look
wait?
at 2 more years
What
from now.
what are the alternatives that have been considered? Let me just ask a simple question on the restroom building. It sounds like there's been no alternatives considered, and I don't hear a willingness, frankly, to consider other alternatives.
There's definitely a willingness, and I think that part of the issue is when you have to submit the warrant article, it can always go down, right? It can always go down. It cannot go up, but it can always go down. And these are the best numbers that we had from Gail. It includes the design, it includes, there's a little bit of contingency in there. So they're the best numbers that we could get without spending money to get more numbers. I mean, that's the other piece of it.
With all due respect, you're asking people to spend money without any information or data on what the alternatives are. That's what you're asking. It's a trusted situation that we need to get the money now to be able to move forward.
And
There's no,
and you're going to be doing a facility study?
We don't even have that in our planning right now. We haven't
But
talked about it as a
I
school
thought
committee.
At the high school,
high
we
school.
do not have immediate plans for a facility study. The building's not 10 years old yet.
I'm not talking about for the high school. I'm
Okay.
talking about for the public schools. You have.
Which is Concord Public.
You have public
CPS,
schools, you have,
yes.
and presumably that is going to come up with some capital needs. I mean.
At CPS,
and-
yes.
Yeah, all right. And so, but it's the same,
Maintenance, yeah.
it comes from mostly the same place. It's the same money.
Well, we get our money from Carlisle, too. I mean, we have to
okay.
remember that.
Okay, but you're still getting money
Yeah,
from Concord.
Yeah,
Yes,
And-
definitely.
And you may find out when you do your facility study of what the elementary schools need, is that you have priorities there that are more pressing than building 44 toilets.
Well, it would be 23. We're going to cut that in half. Hopefully, the number will be cut in half. It's not 44.
Oh, okay, but it's
But
a
even
large
so,
number.
but it's-
But whatever it is, a couple of $1 million plus,
Mm-hmm.
and you may find you've got things that you would rather do if you had that money, but it's always then going to be, it's just more. It's not instead of.
And again, I think the point's been made that it's an expensive project. Our committee voted on this believing that, given that the building is approaching 10 years, we were running on borrowed time and needed to complete this project. And so, you know, having bathrooms that do not meet the needs of the facility.
I don't know, a lot of us went to
surprised the
went
committee
to
didn't
school in
consider
school buildings that
alternatives.
are 100 years old. And now
And
this
look
is,
what happened to us.
yeah, well, and here we are, I know.
so to be clear, it sounds like no alternatives will be considered, correct? The citizens of both Carlisle and Concord will have no alternatives other than yes or no on this without any sense of what the alternatives are.
No, we can provide more detail on that, especially for both town meetings. We'll provide more.
I
Will
can tell you.
detail more what though, more what?
Go ahead.
Alternatives around other options besides a building?
No, background information, more what the other options are. I mean, we can all go online and because I've done it myself and I can look at some of the prefabs and could we order 10 of these and get them delivered? Now, what is that going to take to tie into the sewer system? Like it doesn't, I don't know. We don't have those numbers.
We
So
do a
need
little bit. It's
design.
complicated.
We totally understand that it's complicated.
Are these heated?
No.
They're not heated?
No.
Oh, I thought they were.
They're not
Okay.
lighted, they're not
No.
heated, they're.
There's-
No, no,
No,
no, I mean
there's-
the new ones, the $2.3 million.
Oh,
The
heated?
new,
So
the
we
new,
have toured,
the concrete building that you're,
A lot of
Most
them
are
are
not.
not. The only reason that you heat them is so you don't have a pipe to freeze, but it's like more of like a blower system that you turn on. It's nothing fancy. It's not actually heating. It's like you turn on a heated fan.
we're talking about the $2.3 million.
Yes.
Okay.
heated.
So they're not heated.
Not heated. There is lighting. There's electricity and there's plumbing. And when you're talking about the bathrooms and the concessions, be clear that the concessions area, it's plugs and a sink. It's not anything outrageously, it's 300 square
So
feet.
they're kind of like the ones at Giroux. Giroux aren't heated either.
Yeah, they're not heated. And some of the towns, if they don't, they shut them down and they have a situation where you have to pump them out. So they didn't tie into the sewer system. And so they have their own septic system.
A tight tank?
Yep, and they strongly discourage that. In
That's
Weston,
very
that's what they
expensive.
have.
Okay.
And they
To
strongly
operate.
discourage that because
Yep.
they said, we have to shut them down.
Yep.
We have to get them pumped out.
Okay.
And so all of these things, even like a temporary, like what you see at a wedding, like if you were to have a wedding and rent a temporary bathroom, you still have to pump all of those out, and there's expense, and it's annual expense
Yeah.
tied to that.
Okay.
So although it's, yeah?
Was there any thought of going back to the private group that did the initial fundraising and asking them to raise funds?
So they're not in existence. And there's a board, and they file their tax documents every year, but it really needs to be.
The answer to Parashar is yes. I mean, I think we're trying to resurrect them for the track, so.
They are in existence if they have a board and they're
Correct.
filing something.
They're just not active
So they
right now.
they may need to get restarted, but you can't tell us they don't exist.
No.
No, they exist, but they're not active.
Yeah, and
So
our
was
every
there any-
intention.
so Was there any thought in going to them and asking them to reactivate themselves and complete their job? They finished this, they undertook this themselves, it sounds like from that first history slide.
So-
And yet, from the taxpayers now.
Right,
We're
but-
presently working on that because we have identified several individuals who have interest in the track. We can work with them to get activated sooner and potentially put this as part of their project as well to offset some of the costs.
Well, why not
Certainly.
ask them to offset all the costs? That's what I'm trying to, this is the point, I think, we're hearing, oh, well, we'll consider alternatives and bring them. We might ask them to offset some of the costs. Again, that doesn't sound like proper capital planning, frankly. Not considering alternatives, not figuring out what other funding sources are, and yet just coming back to the town, because we're like Staples, we're the big red easy button.
I'll push back on that, Parashar. I think, again, we discussed this project in 2021 when I was on the committee, and we were presented with this same plan at a cost of $1.3 million. That cost has escalated $1 million in just 2 years. I do think delayed action on this is a detriment to the taxpayer. I don't want to come back in 2 years from now with a $4 million building. I think that expediency here, because we are talking about something so simple, we are talking about a cinder block rectangle with nothing significant architecturally. This is likely as simple as it's going to get if you are going to, in fact, build a permanent structure, which the committee thought was necessary. As Tracy pointed out, we are the only school in the Dual County League without a permanent structure. We've had temporary structures for 9 years now. The committee decided via our vote that it was time to move on from that. Then we can continue to debate this back and forth at this table, but I don't suspect it's going to yield much today.
So, of course, what we're really here to talk about is not the toilet building. What we really want to talk about is coming to some agreement on a process where all of the various parties involved in capital expenditures for the two towns are going to do some planning together with no surprises, and we sit down and we prioritize things on the basis of the overall needs of the towns involved, not the needs of any particular constituency. And I think, this is probably a good start in terms at least getting out on the table the fact that there are concerns that everyone has about how the process has worked, and it has really been more a competitive process than a cooperative one. And so I would like to find a roadmap to go forward, where maybe we could have, I don't know, I hate to create another committee because, I feel
Please
the
don't.
same way, I feel the same way about committees as I do about PowerPoints. But I think we need some, forum, a forum of, not a big forum, a small forum of representatives of the different interests here
Yeah.
that could agree that we're not going to make any capital plans without sitting down with everybody involved and deciding what the priorities are.
And I guess if this is an appropriate time, and I'll speak for myself, I share those exact same frustrations. I've brought a CPS capital plan 3 years in a row that has been totally supported by the school committee and then totally altered by the time I get to town meeting. And we're all frustrated, Henry. So, and those come up with different issues and some other topics, but same outcome of we need a process that's all a little more aligned, and we're having conversations earlier rather than later. And so we couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
So
And
it's what is the process?
Okay, so
Intersection of the capital desires and requirements with sustainability is this
Yes.
other aspect that's spinning around that has an impact on the schools and has an impact on the town, and we're at cross purposes. right?
Exactly.
We're pressing on people to say, we need this, we need that, and then in the background, someone's saying, oh, no, we can't do that because it's not a green solution. That's not fair, right?
Exactly.
We have to have all the parties at the table, and everyone has to understand what the goals are. Because it's not fair to tell, have people go off and do it and come back and say, well, that's not the right
Well,
answer
yeah,
for the folks on the
and
committee.
it doesn't mean that everybody has to agree.
Agreed.
It doesn't. We don't all have to agree, but we do have to come up with an action, a plan of decide what is going to happen, even if everybody doesn't agree on everything that we do.
Sustainability has to be part of that discussion.
All right.
It does.
So
It absolutely does.
what's the next step?
One of the ideas that came up at the Finance Committee was a building committee, which would look at, this isn't going to address your frustration, Dr. Hunter, about the 900K, but it will, I think, get a broader view and a longer-term view of some of the building requirements or facility requirements we have. So it'd be a building committee similar to the middle school building committee that would look at large projects, renovations with, prioritizing sustainability, and also look across both the town and the schools. One of the concerns I have about the CPS facility study that you're doing is that it doesn't really, I don't think it's going to ask, should we relocate? Should we be relocating Ripley, for example, to another part of the town? Because it's just going to look at the schools.
It's just a physical facility.
Exactly. So it's not going to answer that question about what's best overall for the town, because we have a lot of moving parts now. We have a lot of land available to us that we didn't know we had before. So taking a broader view of the buildings within, the building needs within the entire town and what's available to us.
And to manage those projects.
Well, there's that too.
Well, and I was going to just say that as an extension, rather than a committee. I mean, frankly, the town.
You're right, just to prioritize them.
Well, and I was going to say, rather than a committee, the town has had years and years of experience maintaining, building, and planning infrastructure. So perhaps the town ought to do the same for any of the buildings that are being used for educational purposes in schools. So that way, plan accordingly across the buildings, and, you know, that does away, Henry, with the need for a standing committee.
Wait, so what are you saying, Prashar? We don't need a standing committee?
No, I'm saying instead of a standing committee, you
Yeah.
have all of the buildings be managed by Department of Public Works, DPW. They do this for all the buildings the town uses.
Well, they're
except
not here. Let's just give it to them.
Well, I mean, Lori herself has always said rightfully when we're talking about the buses, that she's not an expert in transportation, right? And she's being asked to figure out busing situations, so it's been leased out. The buses are no longer owned by the town. So at the end of the day, you know, educators are educators. They're not plumbers, electricians, engineers. Why not give that responsibility to the folks that actually have those qualifications and experience?
Just so we're clear, we do hire those people to do that. I'm not running facilities solely, so there are.
No, I understand, but they're under, I mean, you guys are making capital decisions, right? And we just went through this. And yet, you see that the two are not coordinated or aligned with town and schools. Best way to do that is to bring it under one umbrella.
Building on what Parashar is saying, though, I think what we're talking about specifically is facilities planning. So not all of public works any more than, you know, we're talking, but really that subsector. And I think that Mary's absolutely right. We have some very big moving parts at the moment. We're going to have to decide what to do with a surplus middle school building in a year. That's a major facilities decision that hasn't even made it into this part of the conversation.
Yep.
And as well as trying to recognize what some of the priorities for investments are and looking at what those long-term costs of the facilities are. If we don't start to focus on the goals that are associated with the cost of facilities and really look to our facilities experts to manage those costs, we're going to see this. I was noting that going back to the CCRSD budget, the instructional budget actually is under guideline in terms of its overall increase. It's the other things, including the facilities-oriented elements of the budget, which are really escalating in ways that are budget busters if that continues. So I do think that we need to consolidate, at least on the strategic planning level, the facilities plans for the schools in the town at the very least.
Would the first step in a building committee be to take an inventory? And is that what we mean by a facilities plan? What do we mean?
Isn't there a facilities person in the town? So that, in my head, when I hear what Parashar has to say, I'm thinking as the town has a facilities manager. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's no such person.
I think we do.
If they had one, that would be someone who would have that inventory, right? So I don't know, Carrie, is there a facilities manager or no?
We do have a position. The position is vacant. We have a new person coming on in a couple of weeks.
Excellent.
We do.
Got the shot for that.
So while Public Works is not here, I'm here, and we are not in a position to take on school buildings. We do have a facilities study of sorts. It's very high level. The next work that we need to do is something more detailed on each of the buildings.
So I can tell you in Carlisle, we are working towards that very thing. We have, there's a facilities director at the school, and we have facilities director at town, and they are starting to work. They've consolidated their lists, and probably the school facilities director will be the top dog, so to speak, and we are working towards a town-wide facilities department that will be coordinating all those needs, and where people will be putting in tickets, and somebody from one side or the other will be coming to fix whatever needs to be fixed.
But even from a planning perspective.
And from a planning.
They've actually already begun to lay out, you know, over the next number of years, what are the needs from the school's perspective in the town. So that's actually operationally working together.
Yes.
Right.
But already the plans have been put in, and this is something new for us. I mean, coming in with Ryan, the new town administrator, he's kind of spearheaded some of this for us.
So they're doing both. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, this is why it's really important that we're involved in this, because all of this information is new to us. We're in the same situation you are. We have starved our town in terms of capital planning. We have a lot of needs. So although 2.3 doesn't sound like a lot maybe to your town, it's huge to us, even that percentage. So it is vitally important in order for us to work together that we are lockstep with everybody in terms of that. And I can tell you from, not to backslide, but all the points that Parashar has brought up have been brought up amongst our committees as well, to the point that it is in our local paper. And people are not that supportive of it because these are the same questions they're asking. So again, the more of a runway we have, the better we can all work together.
Okay, so how do we make it happen?
What?
Well, I think what we can do is, I mean, we have a warrant article because that is the process, right? I mean, we did that and we voted on it and we're going to move forward with it. But we can put it back on our agenda and have this very discussion with the rest of our committee, because some of our committee is here, but our 2 Carlisle members are not here, so they're not part of this discussion. So we'll have to have another discussion about what we talked about here, so we can put that on our next agenda. I think that would be a first step.
I need to be clear. So what exactly are you going to be talking about? Because I'm confused between this particular warrant article, a facilities plan, a building committee. So what?
So we were still on the region. We're on the amenities building.
Yep.
Because I thought, what I'm hearing
Okay,
is you would
okay,
like
so
to,
you- okay,
you
okay,
would like
okay.
to know other options.
Yes.
That possibly that we could investigate. And I heard that from Parashar also. So I'm just talking
Okay,
about
okay.
at the region and the amenities building.
Got it.
Because we're
Sorry.
getting questions. No, it's totally fine.
No, it's good.
So if
Throwing a
you
monkey
have
wrench in here.
questions that you would like us to discuss as a committee, I'm happy to do that.
Great. I will definitely send it over.
Okay?
Great.
Because we really need all of our members, and we don't have all of our members
Right.
present, and we're not in session, so we actually can't.
We're not expecting you to give an
No, no,
answer
no,
now,
expect that.
obviously.
So we'll put that on our agenda, on our
I
next
know.
agenda.
I just
However-
wanted to give our 2 cents,
That's
our
great.
little portion of the budget that we're part of.
Yeah, for us, the portion that we will need to pay, if we were to use that as debt service for a project, and, that would pay for our police station that we have currently, that we're putting on our warrant this year. So, and we have a 10 million or so fire station that we're looking at. So just so you know, that's a lot of that amount of money is a lot of buying power for us, for those very important projects. And by the way, we are looking at prefab for the fire department, because prefab is not what a lot of people think. We're not talking trailer. Okay, I mean,
It's an actual building.
it's an
right?
actual building, it's permanent, it's not gonna, you're not gonna roll it away. They look very nice, and the cost of construction is amazingly less. So I really would encourage you to at least look at that,
Yep, yep.
Great.
No, that's helpful.
Yeah.
because that's what we're, in fact,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I said,
Yeah.
we're
No,
looking
that's
for it
great.
at our
Yeah.
fire department, our fire department.
All right, so we have both an immediate and practical issue to resolve, and I think we're gonna do that, because you're gonna look at alternatives and see what you
See what
can
it yields,
propose.
yeah.
And then, of course, people either have to like it or not, and it has to be something that is gonna be acceptable to everybody. But that's just, the immediate issue, and we really need to have some kind of institutional structure in order to go forward with facilities and capital expenditures.
I think we share that goal.
Okay, so easily said,
Yeah, how to,
not necessarily easily done. But I don't know how do we try and write a proposal for
I'd like to,
for an institutional way to go about this that is not going to be a 10-year project just to get that through
I'd like
the
to-
whole
can
thing
we-
by the time we're all dead and gone.
I'd like to hear from the town manager and see if she has ideas about how we could do this townwide. Carrie, do you mind? I just put you on. Well, we're kind of, facilities is off the table, right? Centralized facilities, but what did you think about a permanent building committee?
So I think first I'd just like to make a comment that's maybe a little out of sequence here. There are several of us in the room that spent
2 years on a capital planning task force. We did come up with the process, and we're just not following it. So I think the first thing, if we're going to spend time on a new process, is that there's a commitment that we're going to all follow the process. I mean, I don't think there isn't a reason to spend time on something if we're not going to follow the process.
Thank you, Carrie.
I do like the idea of a permanent building committee, and this is the first time in my 32-year career in municipal government that I feel comfortable saying that. And the reason is because we have substantial needs. You know, we're looking at a public safety facility that's probably $50 million. So I'd like to know how Carlisle, how you can do it. But you gave us some tips.
Ours was going to cost that too, but we decided against it. We're just going to Band-Aid, you know.
We have, on the town side, we have a lot of needs. We have probably $150 million worth of needs if we were to meet all of those in capital expense. And I do feel like on the town side, we have been patient, and we have been very supportive of the middle school project, waiting for our chance, and I'm concerned our time is never going to come. And for those of you who were at a presentation that we made last year, you know that we have structural issues in our public safety building. We have trucks that can barely fit in the building. We have a public works facility. I heard today we're probably going to have to redo some portion of the sewer system, the connection over there. We've just replaced part of the building. We have leaks in other places. We have millions of dollars of equipment that is not under roof. And I feel like the only way that our needs are going to compete on the same level is if we have a committee with constituencies on all sides looking at this and hearing everything together. So that would be why I would support a permanent building committee, even though I have not in years past.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
So the select board will take it under advisement whether we should in fact appoint a permanent building committee. What do you think?
I think that's progress. So,
Progress.
should we?
Including representatives from Carlisle for.
Absolutely.
So that when we talk about high school. Do we need a motion, or is that just an intention?
I think the motion we
Another
need
committee to be on.
I think the motion we need is to adjourn.
Okay.
Yeah, what we need to do is come up with, call it a proposal for that and circulate it and give the interested parties an opportunity to weigh in and sort of begin to form it up, and then at some point we would consider it more formally.
Good, Mark, you're talking my language. So how do we actually start? Where does it start? What do you think?
Mary, since it was your idea, did you want to craft the proposal?
Yeah.
Me?
One of my questions.
You pointing to me?
Yeah.
Yes.
One of my questions would be, is this just only capital planning or only facility planning? Because, you know, we have capital plan, and it's always mixed, you know, I've got RTUs and fire
Yes.
trucks, and,
You're right.
you know,
It's
light-
just, it's a building.
just a-
Yeah,
just a
what
building
what I
one.
proposed
Yeah,
was a
just-
building committee, would be buildings, major renovations. And that would be in there, because that's a building. So it would be buildings and major renovations to existing buildings. And we,
Whatever proposal, but the point Kate just made and what Carrie said earlier, we have a capital planning process and a set of recommendations that were delivered a few years ago. We've gotten a little bit better, frankly. We're not there yet in terms of actually executing on those. But if you're going to walk down a road of having a building committee, let's make sure that whatever work the committee does is actually integrated into this process, because otherwise we're just going to get more chaos, and we're actually not going to have an integrated capital plan, which frankly we still don't have.
I think it's important to note that one of the things on our agenda tonight was to talk about the capital at the high school from FY26 through FY29, and we're not, because we don't have that information. So that's, I think, an example of one of the ways that some of the recommendations of the Capital Planning Task Force have kind of fallen off the table. So I think it's really good advice to kind of remind us to get back on that and agree to what we agreed to, recommit to what we agreed to, and then. But I would also say that a building committee is something we need as well.
Okay,
Both.
so the way I think the only way to really implement it is to have a very clear understanding that nothing goes on the town meeting warrant that involves this type of expenditure without without the various parties agreeing to put it there.
I'm not ready to commit to that.
Not ready.
No, I'm not ready to commit to that. I don't feel like, we've had this debate, I'm not sure how much the select board controls what goes on the warrant. That's a whole separate topic.
Well-
But I think we can begin by having conversations with people and getting an understanding so that we understand each other's needs and we act as one town to try to time the investments. And I see pressure.
So I think that the two direct actions coming from here are, one, I think we need to really go back and look at the capital planning process as it was adopted.
Yes.
Ask ourselves why we're not using it, or in what ways are we coming up short in that. And unless we've got really good reasons for not doing that, we should be trying to do that. I think the second thing, which we spent most of the time on tonight, is this notion that facilities themselves need a more global focus and a more experienced focus in order to be prioritized properly and to be vetted properly as they come forward from each organization. So in the absence of that, we get these projects that have sort of various levels of planning done for them. And if we knew that all facilities projects were going to make a stop in that process, then we would be in better shape to do that. And like I said, there's already a portfolio of facilities questions that we'd be, dying to ask somebody. So we ought to try and work up what that is, separate and distinct from, yes, we need to redouble the efforts on the capital planning side.
But the process, this is what Kerry is talking about. This is what we adopted 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And we thought it was a wonderful job.
Last year.
Was it last year?
No. Last year we
Capital-
followed it pretty well.
No, this is from the Division of Local Services.
Yeah.
I think,
No, so we did adopt
We did, the Capital
the
Planning
Elise-
Task
Elise-
Force
Elise
recommendations.
Woodward's Capital Planning
exactly.
Task Force.
We voted to adopt it, but we're
That-
not following
And
it.
we're not following it.
Right.
So whatever process that we decide on needs to have what they call some teeth in it. It has to have some, gatekeeping. It needs to have some understanding that things don't go forward without going through that process. And as long as you just have a document and a procedure and people are free to ignore it, it doesn't do much good.
Henry, with all due respect, in that process, it is the responsibility of the select board and the school committees to hold hearings, get the town manager and the superintendent to provide the 5-year plans so that they can be discussed at those public hearings. So really, it's up to the select board and the school committees to decide if they want to follow the process. And frankly, the finance committee, particularly the last year or two, we have been the ones sort of driving the process. And it really shouldn't be on us. It really is up to the 3 committees I mentioned earlier to drive that process. Unless you guys do it, it's not going to happen.
That's why we're here tonight, Pressure. That is why we're
Yeah,
here
I'm
tonight.
just
So,
making it clear, we don't need more processes.
Yeah.
We just have to say we're going to do this.
okay,
You're
And I do want to say, I did send several emails in October to your committee asking to kick off that process. Just want to put it out there. So I did try this year. They were unanswered. Just to the chair, but in any event. So we tried. but we'll do better next year.
But then what was presented in December wasn't complete.
What?
What was
Yeah,
presented, what was
Tracy-
actually presented in December was incomplete. We don't have to go
We
there.
don't, yes, we don't have
We
to
don't
go
have to go
there,
there.
and it's, we just have to actually be dedicated to this process. Okay? And then we'll figure out how to make it work, but
I guess I would like to, I'd like,
But just to say that, it's our responsibility to have the hearings and all that stuff. The planning and the agreement has to go, I think, start way earlier than the public hearings prior to town meeting, because by that time, it's just pretty much proposals that are up or down.
okay, I guess I'd like to ask, is the school committee committed to the recommendations of the capital planning task force going forward?
Can I answer before they do? Because I sat on that committee for 2 years also. Yes, I am very committed, and I think we did it fairly successfully one year, and then it fell off this year significantly, and once we got off, we never got back on. We've talked a lot about that. So absolutely, I think there's clarity that needs to come. The tiers, I might ban that word tier and see if we can define it differently, because we're not talking apples to apples.
Yep.
And there's some things to clarify, but
Yes.
I personally would hate to see those 2 years get lost. There was school committee representation, there was professional leadership, there was select board representation. There was a lot of great thought that went into that.
And the finance committee reps were on there as well, and Lori, I agree with you. But and Mary, with all due respect, maybe today's not the forum, but a small subset does need to take a look at what we have and haven't done, how closely we have and haven't followed that process, to come up with specific recommendations for everybody involved to follow the process for next fiscal year. And I know Anthony, for example, is looking at the tiers and making sure that that's clear across the board. That ought to happen after the annual town meeting.
But we have to do all of that, but we also can't lose track of the fact that that intersects with, but is not equal to doing legitimate facilities-oriented strategic planning.
Exactly.
And we
Yes.
have
Correct.
in the facilities space.
Yeah.
We need to find a way to fill that.
Right, and that's a job. That's not something a committee does, right? So if this we have to figure out whether it's within the school or within the town, or it's both, who has that job? Who has the inventory? Who's looking strategically at how we're using buildings in the town? If we don't have a person to do that, we're really not maximizing this large investment that we have in capital. And that's not great. So I would press for that ahead of other things, frankly. But I agree 100% with Mark on that. That's a need.
Mm-hmm.
It underlies this, right? You can have all these great meetings, but if you don't have the data and people can't answer the questions, what are we doing here? Why can't we move that? It doesn't help you. You need someone to talk to.
So you're saying we need a
I
person?
think you need a person. You might need two,
And
but you have one.
aren't we talking about filling that position?
We have a facilities director position. The position has been vacant for 6 or 8 months. We've had a significant amount of turnover in town staff. And we did not have the capacity to advance projects. So I'll leave it there, because I don't want,
So Carrie, will this facilities person do the day-to-day operational, like, the tickets that Kate was talking about earlier, and also be able to do planning as far as, town-wide, what are our assets? Will
Yes.
they be able to do that?
yes,
haven't seen the job
It would
description.
be great if we had 3 or 4
Yes.
people, but we don't. We have a director who has the knowledge and experience to manage day-to-day and do planning.
But the typical municipal answer in response to a void at the strategic level is that we as citizens have to find a way to solve that problem from a policy perspective. So it'd be great if we have the staff who can come up with the numbers and the spreadsheets about the buildings that we own and so forth. But in terms of choosing the direction or prioritizing whether it makes more sense to build an amenities building or a DPW garage or some third or fourth other alternative, those are decisions that we can't delegate away to staff.
Yeah.
Good.
That would be
Good
the
point.
committee.
Yep.
Okay. Do I hear the motion? You're not ready yet?
I'm waiting.
Isn't
Mark?
that the motion you were looking for, Henry?
We didn't hear you, Mark.
Move to adjourn.
You want a second?
No second?
Can we talk about something else?
No, I know.
Second. Mr. Howell?
Aye.
Myself, Mary Hartman, aye. Ms. Escobedo?
Aye.
Mr. Dane?
Aye. Thank you very much,
Thank you for
everyone.
coming. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. Thank you.